A named vote will be taken on the amendments to the budget proposals and in respect of the substantive motion. We now move to the formal business of the meeting. Can we take the notice convening the meeting as read? Thank you. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we have apologies from Councillors McDonough, McKeith, Mordy and Dorothy Truman.
Thank you. Are there any further apologies? Thank you. The next item is the minutes of the last ordinary meeting of the Council held on the 25th of January 2023. I understand Councillor Mullen wishes to speak on this item. Councillor Mullen, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It relates to page 7 and it says, a number of questions were asked regarding aspects of the approach to carbon reduction to which responses would be provided separately. The first request is that the questions themselves be detailed and the people who ask them have their names put against them. But the more substantial point is that it's been a month and none of us in the Conservative group, and it might be the case in other groups as well, have not yet had answers. And of particular concern is the fact that that was the third occasion on which members of my group have asked, was there an environmental impact assessment of the decision to cancel the air show? We are not getting answers any time we ask. So could I ask through you, Madam Mayor, if the Deputy Leader can answer that question now, given it is a yes-no question?
Madam Mayor, again, I'll just ensure that officers provide a response as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mullen. That is noted and I will follow that up. Thank you. Councillor O'Brien, did you wish to speak?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I specifically asked for these questions to be detailed in the minutes. They were not done so, and you agreed to that. Why were they not detailed into the minutes, please?
I don't have that answer to hand, but I will make sure I find out as quickly as possible. Thank you. Anyone else? Can we take it? Can we agree the minutes? Agreed. Thank you very much. Members are reminded that dispensations have been granted to all those members who have applied for them in order to deal with matters relating to the budget and setting the council tax. The declarations of interest we have received prior to the meeting are displayed at the entrance to the chamber. If anyone has anything further to declare, can they indicate accordingly, please? Councillor Doyle.
Councillor Doyle, Councillor Buick and Councillor Butler.
Invite them. Councillor Doyle, would you like to make that declaration? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Both in respect of the capital programme and both the declarations I've made at previous meetings. The first in relation to project reference CP0529. I'm a local authority link governor at Fulwell Junior School. And then the second in relation to programme reference CP0575, the Sunnyside Regeneration Scheme. I have a tangential relationship with that scheme through my employer and consultancy work. It's been discussed with members of Law and Governance in the past.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Buick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's just to declare I'm an employee of Tyne Weir Fire and Rescue Service just for the increase in precept.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's just a membership of Unison.
Thank you. Right. It is now with sadness that I advise Council of the passing of former Councillor Raymond Marshall, who served as a Conservative member of the Old County Borough Council, representing the Old Humbledon ward in the late 1960s, early 1970s, and then St Michael's ward until the 1980s. Will you please join me in sending condolences to the family and friends of Raymond Marshall? And I shall ask you all now to stand in silence for a minute as a mark of respect. Okay, thank you, everybody. I'd like to thank those members who have given notice of their wish to speak. Where notice has been given, the member will be invited to speak at the appropriate time. If any member who hasn't given prior notice wishes to speak at any point during the meeting, they should please raise their hand and indicate and speak when invited to do so. That concludes my announcements. I now call upon the leader to move the approval and adoption of the report of the Cabinet.
I so move, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Deputy Leader, do you second the report?
I second the report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Leader, would you like to speak to the Cabinet report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally move the revenue budget and capital programme for next year. As in previous years, we have worked very hard to ensure this is a positive budget, which allows us to continue with our ambitious social and economic regeneration plans for the City of Sunderland, whilst ensuring we continue to protect and support our residents most in need, especially in the midst of the current cost of living crisis. Madam Mayor, we continue to live in unprecedented times as we emerge during 2022 from the biggest public health crisis in living memory. We fell into significant economic instability, with spiralling double-digit inflation, fueling severe cost of living challenges, impacting on our residents, businesses, and the community and voluntary sector in the city. I would like to pay tribute to our council members and workforce, working side by side with our valued partners in supporting all sectors as best we can through these most challenging of times. The introduction of warm spaces, increased welfare support and advice for our residents has proved vital to our residents, especially over the recent winter months. As promised, we continue to review our city plan annually, with our latest plan now covering 2023 through to 2035, reconfirming our vision that Sunderland will be a connected international city with opportunities for all. As you can see all around us, key aspects of the plan are very much taking shape, with key developments being delivered by the Council in partnership with the private sector. The regular review of the city plan enables us to ensure that in a fast-moving environment, we are clear about the considerable progress being made and that our efforts and resources remain focused on delivering further improvements and opportunities for everyone in our city. Key to this is an up-to-date understanding of the challenges for the city and its people, and we well know, Madam Mayor, this is a moving picture as the cumulative impact of national and global economic conditions and the government's resulting policies look set to last for some years to come. Madam Mayor, as workers in a lot of essential frontline services feel forced to strike up and down the country to get a fair day's pay to enable them to heat their homes and put food on the table, some government ministers with many millions in the bank do everything they can to avoid paying their fair share of tax. Yes, the pandemic and now the energy support packages have taken their toll on the country's finances, but in each budget round, the government's spending decisions and choices between what to fund and what not to fund, who to support and who not to support, and who has to take the most pain, continues to call into question their suitability to govern and ensure fairness, equality and transparency. So as ever, Madam Mayor, this Council is ready to forge every opportunity to make sure our ambitious social and economic regeneration plans continue to be delivered and a strong recovery from the challenges in recent years is achieved at the earliest stage. The last 12 months have seen outstanding progress, evidenced by the ongoing developments around us here at Riverside Sunderland, and as we meet here in the recently named Best Corporate Workplace and then the best of the best overall in the British Council for Offices Awards, it shows the direction of travel that this Labour group are taking this council through, regardless of the muttered comments from over there. The regeneration of this area will be the catalyst to drive the whole city's economy. This ambition is attracting significant private sector backing, with Legal & General further investing in the Maker and Faber buildings emerging next to us, which over the coming months will be home to more businesses, more jobs and generate more footfall in the city centre. Then, further investment in the Hillthorn Park manufacturing hub in Washington is nearing completion, with new businesses waiting to take up the large new workspaces there very soon. In terms of Riverside, when finished, it will provide 1,000 energy-efficient homes to rent and buy, to be showcased in our Expo in 2024, attracting global attention. A new business district with 1 million square feet of modern office space, with 10,000 quality jobs brought to the city centre. Work is underway on the new eye hospital just out of the window there, and also well underway on our new Culture House over the road in Keele Square, providing us with a new state-of-the-art city library and creative hub. In line with our clear commitment to a carbon-neutral, cleaner, greener, healthier city, there will be a stunning Riverside Park and a green boulevard in the heart of the city centre. And our linked commitment to promoting and supporting active travel will see a new bridge for pedestrians and cyclists connecting communities across the river. There will also be new housing. There will also be a new Housing, Innovation and Construction Skills Academy taking shape, an initiative by Sunderland College, fully supported by the Council. Our key ambition is to ensure that the infrastructure and jobs being created open the door to employment opportunities for our residents, and that initiatives like the HICSA help create essential skills pathways. Then, some really exciting announcements in the past couple of months as the Sheepfold site enters a new chapter, with renovation works, creating jobs and bringing the beautiful buildings there back to life. In the autumn, it will open as the city's new leisure and events destination, with some fantastic food, drink and lifestyle businesses opening their doors. And the development of our stunning seafront also continues apace, with existing businesses growing and thriving, and new ones adding to an increasingly diverse and vibrant leisure offer. We also continue to lead the way in becoming one of the UK's smartest cities, creating next-generation digital infrastructure in partnership with our strategic partner, BAI Communications. We know that to create the opportunities our residents want and deserve, good jobs, healthier living, great housing and the lifelong opportunity to learn and grow, being at the forefront of developing new technologies will have a huge positive impact and support and attract businesses to invest and innovate so that they can play their full part in creating opportunities for our residents. We're now a good way into the programme of connecting fibre to every premise in Sunderland and enabling 5G Wi-Fi networks to give everybody ultra-fast connectivity anywhere in the city. And Sunderland's leading the way on self-driving, zero-emission HGVs too. First, we had the 5G connected automotive logistics pilot, establishing a proof of concept for the UK's first zero-emission autonomous truck, carrying live loads between Vantec and Nissan. And then building on this success, we have recently announced the Sunderland Advanced Mobility Shuttle project, which will trial 3 self-driving zero-emission shuttles transporting passengers on public roads between Sunderland Interchange, Sunderland Royal Hospital and the University City campus. So with that, Madam Mayor, I am pleased to announce that there is more in store in the year ahead, ensuring we continue our journey towards delivering the city plan vision. We will continue to invest in our city, we will continue to invest to protect the most vulnerable people in our city, and we will continue to invest in services that our residents tell us are important to them, such as tackling antisocial behaviour and increasing community safety. We are now well into the second decade of this Conservative government, and councils across the country are still crippled by the impact of prolonged and deep real-term cuts over this period, alongside increasing cost pressures, particularly in social care. We are again told by the government that our core spending power is to rise in 2023-24, but again, a proportion of this is relying on hitting our local council taxpayers with a rise of 5% at a time when they can least afford it, and we cannot let that happen, Madam Mayor. To be fair, the trend of recent local government finance settlements has continued again for 2023-24 with additional welcome grant funding into social care, though this additional funding will need to cover a number of challenges being faced by the social care sector, including significant inflationary pressures faced by care providers and staff recruitment and retention in the context of a chronically depleted workforce, all at a time when hospitals are needing to improve on their discharge rates into a care sector which was already teetering on the edge. These financial pressures are not restricted to adult social care, with children's services facing similar inflationary pressures from providers who look after our most vulnerable children in the city. The levels of funding provided, compared to the current and expected cost and demand pressures, mean 2023 is going to be another challenging year from a budgetary perspective and continues to lay bare the disproportionate funding reductions we have had to endure since 2010. And as in previous year, the local social care precept has been used by the government to shift some of this burden onto local taxpayers. Although the social care sector continues to dominate the headlines and utilises an increasing proportion of our annual spending requirement, our other vital services are not immune to these inflationary pressures. Pay rises, increased energy and fuel costs, alongside general cost pressure on goods and services, mean all council services are feeling the squeeze whilst attempting to maintain our high standards. And so, with these challenges in mind, we must focus on setting a balanced budget for next year. Since 2010, we have worked hard to protect residents and communities from the impact of the government's funding cuts. I can confirm that budget savings proposed today total £13.3 million and have been very carefully considered to ensure minimal impact on our residents and our communities. Madam Mayor, it is important to note that because of the difficult decisions our council has taken in the past, coupled with prudent financial management, we are able to rely on reserves to support next year's budget, ensuring we minimise the council tax increase for our residents at a time when they can least afford it. We will ensure that we continue to protect the most vulnerable citizens within our communities through both investment in children's and adult services provision, with the inclusion of over £17 million of additional funding next year to support the already mentioned cost and demand pressures. With this budget, we have continued to recognise that some of our environmental services are extremely important to our residents and that we need to ensure full access to these. We are therefore supporting communities to access these, given the cost of living crisis, through making pest control services permanently free for our residents, providing free willy bin replacements to residents whose bins have been stolen, and providing free bulky waste collections to residents from April 2023 onwards. Madam Mayor, I have outlined a revenue budget to ensure that excellent day-to-day services continue to be delivered in the city and our residents continue to be supported. And as I have outlined, we are committed to delivering on our city plan and on our ambition for Sunderland so that greater opportunities are created for our people. I am very pleased to say, therefore, we are continuing with our ambitious capital programme into next year. We will be investing across a wide range of areas. In housing, we will continue investing through the Housing Development and Investment Plan and the Vaux Housing Development. In regeneration schemes, we will be investing further at Riverside Sunderland, Culture House, Sunnyside, the train station, in our highways network, the port, and at the International Advanced Manufacturing Park, to name just a few. In continuing to create our smart city, we will further build on our partnership with BAI Communications, invest in smart technologies to support service delivery, and keep Sunderland firmly on the global map when it comes to the smart agenda, helping our residents and businesses grow. And in schools, we are supporting new buildings and refurbishments across the city. Madam Mayor, these are just some of the headlines, and our plans also include significant investment in our parks and open spaces, in line with our commitment to be one of the first net zero carbon cities in the country. All of these investments will help grow our economy, ensuring we are a city where businesses want to invest and people can benefit from widespread opportunities and a good quality of life. However, this continued ambition and investment needs to be funded and difficult decisions must be made to deliver a sustainable budget. As previously stated, raising council tax is not a decision we take lightly, especially in these unprecedented times. But if we don't raise council tax now, we will need to identify more service reductions and not continue with the investment in the development of our city as stated. The government are expecting us to increase council tax by 5% from April at a time when they know that most households in this country are already seriously struggling. Madam Mayor, with that in mind, we have sought to protect our residents as best we can. It is therefore proposed to raise council tax by a total of 2.99%. That includes a 1% in the social care precept implemented by the government to help fund adult social care pressures. This increase represents an increase of 61 pence a week for a Band A property or 91 pence a week for the average Band D property. Although we would rather not increase our council tax, it remains the lowest in Tyne and Wear and indeed the lowest in the wider North East region, providing strong value for money for our residents. Madam Mayor, we must ensure we continue to budget and plan in a financially resilient manner. Although we must use £9 million of reserves next year to balance our budget, we are well placed to allow this one-off use, whilst maintaining appropriate levels of reserves for 2023, 2024 and beyond. We must recognise that we cannot use reserves to prop up the revenue budget on an ongoing basis, but these current difficult times are truly exceptional. Let me be clear, whilst we have a balanced budget for next year using an essential level of reserves, the medium-term financial plan points to an ongoing savings requirement totalling over £40 million by 2026-2027. George Osborne's austerity is still with us. Sustainable options must therefore be developed and delivered. Madam Mayor, shortly, my Cabinet colleagues will briefly present their own individual portfolios. In the meantime, I commend to Council this evening both the revenue budget and capital programme, which will enable us to continue to invest in our city and deliver the best services we possibly can for our residents. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Deputy Leader, would you like to speak? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, as Deputy Leader and Portfolio Holder for Clean Green City, I endorse the budget proposals presented by the Leader of the Council. Today's budget proposals allow for the investment this city needs to meet our regeneration aspirations, to protect the vulnerable and also our wider resident population, as this ongoing cost of living crisis is impacting in some way in every single household in our city. We must also balance our obligations of meeting resident and business need with ensuring this is carried out in a financially responsible manner. With this in mind, Madam Mayor, I have to commend Cabinet colleagues, elected members and staff for their efforts over many months in producing the budget proposed here today, and for ensuring that those budget reduction proposals that are brought forward have sought to minimise the impact on services as far as possible. I also want to pay tribute to the continued work of the Scrutiny Coordinating Committee, who've also played an important role in the production of these budget proposals. The revenue budget presented allows us to protect essential, much valued services, and as members will appreciate, in times of such unprecedented inflationary pressures, to continue to deliver the same level of services to residents and businesses is in of itself no small feat. Notwithstanding this, significant additional resources have been needed into social care and our environmental services. As the Leader has already outlined, at a time of such a squeeze on households, my portfolio will support our residents by making the vital services of pest control, bin replacements and bulky waste collections free of charge as part of these budget proposals today. Moving on to the longer-term investment in the city, we continue to deliver on this through our ambitious capital programme. The development of Riverside Sunderland is very much underway, with further visible investment now in the city centre through the redevelopment of Sunderland Central Station and Culture House as just a couple of those examples. Looking beyond the city centre, we continue our investment at the International Advanced Manufacturing Park and also Hillthorne Business Park in Washington. IAMP will be home to the first large-scale gigafactory in the country, building and Envision AESC's track record as its existing facility. With hundreds of millions of pounds of private investment by Envision into their new battery production facility, alongside Nissan's own investment to create an electric vehicle hub, this will drive our green economy and, importantly, bring many new jobs to the area. This scale of investment demonstrates Sunderland is the place to do business. We are also providing financial assistance in the form of economic development grants to further support inward investment and job growth in key sectors by businesses of all sizes across the whole of the city. I am very happy to say that the enabling works at the Ports Enterprise Zone sites is nearing completion. Hot on the heels of this investment, following approval earlier this month, the East Shore site adjoining Hudson Dock will become home to a new facility for another international company, Quantafuel, bringing more jobs and investment into the city. The port continues to operate in the challenging global economy impacted by the war in Ukraine. The flexibility of our port operations to react to such changes and its ability to continue to attract international companies to make our port their operational base is a significant achievement. We are continuing our investment into the port through the proposed capital programme, protecting our significant asset for many generations to come. In addition to the above, the budget proposals include further investment within my portfolio. This includes investment in coastal defences, ongoing regeneration at the Elmore site, a tree management programme and investment in the refuse and environmental services fleet. As a council, we are continuing to recognise the vital importance of investing in this city to help improve the resilience and encourage our own self-sufficiency. I can confirm that the proposed increase in council tax is not a decision that is being taken lightly, Madam Mayor. However, the government have clearly set out over the past 13 years to shift the burden towards the council taxpayer and away from central government, and their funding analysis suggested we actually increase council tax further than we are proposing for next year. So with that, Madam Mayor, I feel that the revenue budget and capital programme presented today recognises the financial challenges we and our residents and businesses are facing, whilst also supporting the pursuit of our ambitions to drive our city forward as articulated through our city plan. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Before dealing with any amendments, the individual portfolios will be introduced by the portfolio holders, who I will call in turn. Deputy Leader, I am aware that you've already outlined everything. You do not wish to speak again. Thank you very much. I'll call on Cabinet Secretary Councillor Stewart. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Madam Mayor, as Cabinet Secretary, can I first of all endorse the budget proposals presented by the Leader of the Council today. As the Leader has set out, the budget planning during another unprecedented year has been challenging, but starting from a robust financial position that our Council has, we are able to present a budget which protects our residents, Madam Mayor. It also protects our frontline services and, importantly, allows our ambitious city plan developments that are transforming this city to continue. But let us be clear, difficult decisions have been made and will continue to be a necessity due to the deliberate act by successive Conservative governments, and sometimes with a little helping hands from the Liberal Democrats, to cut funding to local government. Well, some people never forget. Thank you very much. There we are. Okay. Anyway, back to the budget, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Councillor. Please carry on.
due to the deliberate act by successive Conservative governments, with a little helping hand from the Liberal Democrats, to cut funding to local government. The point I was hoping to make was the next point, but you obviously interrupted me, is that in real terms, Sunderland's budget next year will be 27.5% less in real terms than it was in 2010. And that is a lot of money, Councillor.
Say it again, Paul.
27.5% less in real terms funding to this council.
Disgraceful.
Local government remains underfunded. So, for example, the health crisis is needing social care to increase capacity, while inflation is making this vital service more and more costly for us to deliver. The government's response being to once again push into the distant future planned adult social care reforms to release short-term additional funding to councils, in effect to avoid the whole care system from collapsing. This is the legacy of 13 years of this government's inadequate approach to funding services for the most vulnerable in our society. Madam Mayor, against this backdrop, the revenue and capital proposals have importantly been through a rigorous process during months of development and consultation, and I would like to thank Cabinet colleagues and members and officers who have worked hard to produce the budget proposed today. Through my Cabinet Secretary portfolio, I continue to provide corporate oversight of the Council's budget into the medium term. The budget proposals today set out the need for once again to use reserves to support the balancing of next year's budget. The use of these reserves, totalling £9 million, is no insignificant sum and must be a temporary measure, but one that I believe is needed, Madam Mayor, and it is the right thing to do to protect the most vulnerable in our society due to the cost of living crisis we face by this incompetent government. Nearly forgot that point, Madam Mayor. There we are. Okay. The medium-term financial plan also presented today is a detailed risk assessment of cost pressures and funding assumptions in what can only be described as a very uncertain world. The growing demands, record levels of inflation, pay pressures and a pending recession, all exacerbated by the turmoil which followed the Conservative government's ill-fated mini-budget in September last year. And I do believe that one will go down in history, and we'll all remember that when we're very old indeed, I think. Our own cautious and prudent approach to forecasting and planning seeks to mitigate this uncertainty where possible, with our overall financial position demonstrating financial resilience into 23-24 and beyond. But looking ahead, financial challenges still remain. We cannot become one of the ever-growing number of councils around the country finding themselves in financial difficulties, the most recent being Conservative-controlled Thurrock Council announcing it was unable to balance its books, Madam Mayor. The challenge to bridge the medium-term funding gap is significant and one we must move to develop a plan quickly, through identifying further cost savings and securing additional funding. As noted, the impact of this process on services can be smoothed over time through the use of our prudently accrued reserves. Get that word out. The financial resilience of local government across the whole country continues to be under strain. Future funding increases provided by the government must adequately reflect this. Sadly, I fear this cry for more resources will only be realised when more councils, less financially secure than ourselves, just simply go to the wall. The government's fair funding review and business rates retention changes continue to be delayed, a statement I have made annually for more years than I can remember, Madam Mayor, and indeed the revolving door of ministers in the Department of Levelling Up Homes and Communities has not helped to progress this in the last 12 months. The uncertainty of continued one-year government funding allocations makes it extremely difficult to proactively plan with confidence. Madam Mayor, we need this government to ensure a fair and equitable new funding system which appropriately recognises need and the ability to raise income locally. We continue to put our case to government so that any new system fully protects northern cities such as ours. I continue to be extremely concerned, whilst this uncertainty exists, that the government will continue to reduce national support and increasingly force councils to rely on local sources of funding, mainly through council tax, including the adult social care precept, that the government continues to use as a backdoor way to pass the buck to councils to fund adult social care. Looking further at adult social care precept, taxpayers may be interested to note that the Conservative governments began to offload costs of adult social care from 2016 by telling councils to issue a separate precept. Back in 2016-17, it amounted in Sunderland to the equivalent of £23.72 for a Band D property in this city. This Conservative tax on care, Madam Mayor, has continued to rise to the point that it will stand at £203.83 for a Band D property as part of council tax bills in the year ahead. Turning now to council tax. Rather than trying to support residents during a cost of living crisis, this government is disgracefully punishing councils by asking them to, and their residents by asking them to increase council tax by 5% at a time when our residents need all the help they can get.
How much was that, Paul?
It said they want everybody to their council tax to go 5%. And indeed, as the leader mentioned, over 75% of councils have followed suit. But we intended to say no to the government today. As usual, they are wanting our residents to pay for their incompetence and their mismanagement of the economy. Under this government, the rich seem to get richer and the poor poorer, with the Office of Budget Responsibility expecting a 7.1% fall in living standards in the year to March 2024. And that, Madam Mayor, is the equivalent, and I did, a little mathematical sum at £7.10 in every £100 of income that individuals might have in their household. That is a huge, huge impact on every household in this city. The impact of that reduction in living standards that is expected over the next 2 years, caused by this incompetent government. Madam Mayor, unsurprisingly, Conservative-led Northumberland have followed the instructions of the government and proposed to increase their council tax by 4.99%. It's a reminder that while Tories talk of tax cuts, when they actually in power, they cannot resist themselves. Indeed, we find the same with the Conservative Lib Dem Independent Coalition of Chaos, that's a long one, in Durham.
Oh, really?
Following the same government instructions. Sadly, they are not alone, as I've mentioned. 75% of councils proposing similar increases. Sunderland Labour have consistently said no, Madam Mayor, to this diktat from the government. No, we will not do the government's dirty work for them. We have therefore taken the decision to keep increasing council tax to as low as possible, and therefore, as part of these proposals for 23-24, we are proposing an increase of 2.99%. This will hopefully be more manageable for our residents, but also help us to ensure that we protect our residents and protect our services. This proposed increase is the lowest in the whole of the North East and once again reflects our commitment to support our residents and keep council tax low in Sunderland. Indeed, by way of an example, Madam Mayor, if we look at the other Tyne-and-Wear authorities, South Tyneside are expected on a Band D property, they will pay £192.51 more than Sunderland residents. North Tyneside, we're coming to other authorities in a minute. North Tyneside, £214.03 more than Sunderland. Newcastle, £282, will you stop interrupting? Newcastle, £282.20 more in council tax. Gateshead, £433. And Conservative Northumberland, £354.94 more in council tax. Sunderland keeps council tax low. Madam Mayor, I feel it's important. There we are. Madam Mayor, I feel it's important to reiterate that what the leader has outlined, we will continue to protect our most vulnerable residents through providing excellent social care and welfare services and additional financial support to over 30,000 residents through our council tax support scheme. The budget proposals also continue our significant capital investment over the next 4 years, and for my portfolio, there are plans to place investment of over £36 million on a range of schemes. This includes continuing investment into the council's estate, including energy efficiency works, smart city initiatives to deliver further fibre and 5G infrastructure and through further investment into the Council's essential ICT infrastructure. And within this in mind, Madam Mayor, I believe the revenue budget and capital programme do represent the most balanced and appropriate way forward possible, and I therefore fully support the proposals. Madam Mayor, I started off by saying that this budget was about protecting our residents. Words are easy, and we'll get lots of words from the opposition later with their amendments, but it's actions that really matter. And in that sense, Madam Mayor, it's a reminder of what our actions are as Sunderland Labour. Madam Mayor, we promised to provide free bulky waste. It's in the budget. We promised to provide free pest control. It's in the budget. We promised to provide free bins if they're stolen, Madam Mayor. It's in the budget. And we promised to keep council tax low, and it's in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary.
Up one voice over there already, haven't we, councillors?
Thank you. Children Learning and Skills, Councillor Farthing, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
That's done again. Your mic.
It's not come on. As many of you will know, this is my last budget meeting as a councillor. And I can say, as a member of the Cabinet and the ruling group, that I'm extremely proud of the city plan and the achievements in the timeline. Despite the fact that we've been going through a global pandemic, we have achieved. And what we're going to achieve is set out as well, something to be very proud of. Now, the lingering legacy of the COVID pandemic and the current cost of living crisis, 2022-23 was a year of continued progress and improvement for children's services. Together for Children as an outstanding, and I'll give everybody the opportunity to clap again, outstanding, rated children's service, opened a further new residential care setting, maintained the number of highly valued foster carers across the city, increased the range of preventative services to young people, had a good with outstanding elements for youth offending service inspection, and along with many of our VCS partners across the city, delivered support through the Holiday Activity Fund to several thousand children. These statistics are amazing, with over 2,000 families in the early help or social care system at any one time. This is no small achievement. That's testament to the great work and dedication of the teams, but also the recognition that the wise investment decision the Council has made have paid dividends. Inevitably, however, the increases in demand and complexity of children and families' needs caused by the pandemic have resulted in further costs to the Council. And despite our success in reducing the number of cared for children, the cost of that care from the external providers has increased. And in some cases, it's eye-watering. The Council has made provision for that rising cost in the proposed budget and medium financial plan, but future years will undoubtedly be difficult, with the Local Government Association estimating, for example, that children's social care in England is facing a £3 billion funding gap for 2024-25. Madam Mayor, turning to our schools budget, which, as colleagues will know, are predominantly funded by the Dedicated Schools Grant, we continue to experience pressures in relation to our high needs block funding. This, again, is a national issue, and in Sunderland we have seen a further 10% rise in education and healthcare plan numbers during 2022-23. We have a good track record in managing this budget in conjunction with our Schools Forum. But as with children's social care, we need a sustainable funding solution to be implemented by the government, and as soon as possible, along with the reinstatement of the School Improvement Grant. Finally, Madam Mayor, following the opening of our fantastic new Sunningdale Special School, Willowwood Primary and Hetton Primary School, I am pleased that today's proposed capital programme continues to support investment in our school estate. The government continues to underfund school building programme, and the Council has had to fill this void to ensure we invest in the future of our children. Madam Mayor, with this in mind, I would conclude by saying We will continue to manage the Children's Services budget with discipline and to the very best of our ability to support our children and families, and I commend the proposals for my portfolio. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Dynamic City, Councillor Johnston, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As noted by the Leader and colleagues, as a council, we must continue with the delivery of our ambitious city plan. The city plan outlines our achievements on this journey to date and our significant ambitions moving forward. We recognise the need to grow to enable our city to become as self-sustainable as possible, and my portfolio plays a vital part in this through our regeneration and housing activity. I'm therefore delighted that the budget proposals within my portfolio continue our significant capital investment over the next 4 years, with plans in place to invest £319 million on a range of exciting schemes. Looking around us today, this activity is very much underway with the rapid development of Riverside Sunderland and across to the Sheepfolds. As demonstrated by the 2 rising buildings behind us here at City Hall, the private sector has very much come with us on this journey. In addition, there's further planned investment in the Sunnyside through the redevelopment of new and better homes and provision of new workspaces. Both investments will support regeneration in a key location within the city centre. Investments in other projects are progressing, including improved housing offer via Housing Delivery Investment Plan, which I am delighted to say our housing team, in partnership with our adult social care team, is continuing to be recognised both locally and on a national stage, recently winning a further 2 national awards with the Housing Digital Awards for the most innovative supported care service and the headline award of the night, Madam Mayor, beating off competition from 26 other providers from across the UK and being recognised as the most innovative housing provider in the UK. A fantastic achievement from everyone involved, really putting Sunderland on the map and acting as trailblazers for the city in terms of housing. But that's not all. We also have sites at Vaux and across the wider city, as well as plans for homeless accommodation through the Inspiring Futures programme. The Council's capital investment will support the delivery of high-quality, energy-efficient, low-carbon and affordable new homes in sustainable communities. The driving ambition of the Council is bringing others with us through the leveraging of investment from central government, working with registered providers and private sector investors and developers. Jointly, we will drive new and improved homes across our city. This includes the new Housing Innovation and Construction Skills Academy, which will enable our residents to develop the skills they need to equip them to access the skilled and well-paid jobs within our local economy. As a council, we continue to work closely with partners and investors to deliver on our aim of making Sunderland a dynamic city, providing better employment opportunities and an improved housing offer. Madam Mayor, with that, I'd like to commend the budget proposals from the Dynamic City portfolio. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Healthy City, Councillor Checker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, before turning to the detail within my own portfolio budget, can we first consider the national context regarding the ongoing funding issue with adult social care and public health? The Local Government Association has stated that the recent additional funding announced by government for adult social care is a step forward, but significantly falls short of the £13 billion that they've called for to address the severity of the pressures facing social care services. Comprehensive funding of adult social care will not only alleviate the much publicised pressure on the NHS, but will mean thousands of people are able to live an equal life and are less likely to end up in hospital at all. There are more people with complex needs, which is placing demand and pressure on all of our services. Add to this the current inflation and pay pressures on ourselves and our providers, then the Local Government Association's stark national headline figures become entirely understandable. The system is broken and it must be fixed. As if we need reminding, our adult social care services have demonstrated their significant value both through the pandemic and now as vulnerable adults struggle with the cost of living crisis. We've continued to deliver excellent services through our own care and support company and through external care providers, the care services that some of our most vulnerable residents depend on. Given people's rising needs and care cost pressures, pressures, the funding package set out in the government's funding settlement is helpful, but nowhere near what is needed. It currently falls well short of the £7 billion a year for extra social care that the current Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, identified as necessary when he was chair of the Commons Health and Social Care Committee. A long-term funding solution is urgently needed in order to ensure a sustainable, high quality and sufficient care and health workforce to meet needs now and going forward. We're pleased to see the important roles councils play in joining up health and care services by supporting hospital discharges, as well as the focus on prevention and providing care and support to people in community settings being recognised. We will do everything we can to make this system work, but a sustainable long-term funding solution must be there to support us. Madam Mayor, the budget proposals outlined today for my Healthy City portfolio arise from work undertaken over many months to develop a service offer that meets assessed need in the most cost-effective way. And as outlined by the leader, additional funding has been prioritised for social care within the Council's proposed revenue budget. This will support investment in services, help to meet the rising cost in demand, and seek to address the inflationary impact of services we secure from social care providers. We will continue to provide public health strategies and services to improve health overall and to tackle inequalities that have been clearly demonstrated and exacerbated by the pandemic, as well as the cost of living crisis, and to support our residents to live healthier lives. Our planning is made much more difficult by the continued late confirmation of the amount of the public health grant to be received by local authorities. Our budget proposals also include capital investment to improve our day centre provision in the city, investment in learning disabilities community provision, as well as further investment into assistive technology to promote the independence and well-being of our residents, award-winning, in fact. In addition, there will be further investment for the disabled facilities grants, which will pay for essential housing adaptations to help people stay in their own homes. So as I've outlined, Madam Mayor, the financial position moving forward remains extremely challenging. These proposals I'm putting forward today represent a balanced response to the current circumstances. And with that, I would like to commend the budget proposals for the Healthy City portfolio. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Checker. For Vibrant City, Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, next year's budget proposals for the Vibrant City portfolio continue the work that's been developed to strengthen the cultural, sporting and events offer within our city. As we've now emerged out of COVID, numbers of visitors and residents engaging in our offer in the city are thankfully returning to normal. We continue to maximise our cultural and events offer across the city. From April to December 22 alone, our museum in Winter Gardens has welcomed over 209,000 visitors. That's significantly up on the previous year as things return to normal. Arts Centre Washington and Sunderland Empire also continue to draw thousands of visitors, with packed out shows continuing till 2023. In total, the Council has facilitated 55 events from April to December, which have been attended by over 270,000 residents and visitors to our city. This significant number of events included the Festival of Light and the Cubics and Let's Rock North East Festivals at Harrington Country Park, which collectively attracted 155,000 visitors. Lots of people coming in, as well as just enjoying what we have on offer. Pardon?
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
We'll not talk about that here. Building on our previous
Point of
successes...
order, Madam Mayor.
Sorry.
Point, Councillor
I'm citing Rule Part 4, Section 1, Subsection 21, Members' Code of Conduct. Madam Mayor, Councillor O'Brien continuously interrupts all speakers as they get up. This behaviour is unacceptable, and I call on you to put a stop to it immediately. I'm elected by the residents of this city to do a job. The job today is to implement the budget of this city worth hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds. It's not a laughing matter. It's not a joke. You need to be sensible about it, and you need to behave in that way. I would actually suggest, Madam Mayor, you should actually join the West Area Committee board and see how he's treated by Councillor Haswell, because he behaves in the same way at that meeting. But Councillor Haswell has a brilliant way of managing his behaviour at that meeting, and I would ask you to take a leaf out of his book and managing him in that same way.
Thank you, everyone. Noted, Councillor Ty. It has been quite excessive tonight, Councillor O'Brien, so I'd appreciate you wait until you're called to speak. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Right, so thank you. Building on our previous successes, we want to grow the city's reputation as an event city, and we will continue to innovate and develop this offer, which will include digital provision across a number of platforms. We will continue to develop and announce more new and exciting events as soon as we can, providing some much needed entertainment, activity and fun, whilst attracting residents and visitors into the city centre and supporting our city's plans, vibrant city ambitions. In 2023, we will continue to work in partnership with the Business Improvement District and the private sector, sharing financial resources to deliver a programme of city centre events. There would also be a concentrated focus to deliver a programme of community-led events. Discussions have already commenced to host a bigger Pride, Mela and Chinese New Year, in addition to a programme of events in the neighbourhoods across the city. In 2022, we saw the Tour of Britain cycle race and the British Super Series Triathlon Grand Final come to our city. Bringing these major national events into our city places us firmly as a national events destination and also lets visitors witness the scale of our regeneration and ambitions. The budget allows for capital investment of over 42 million over the next 4 years. Key to this is, been mentioned many times tonight, the exciting development of Culture House. The scheme has now commenced and will be a fantastic addition to the city for residents and visitors alike. This 21st century cultural venue here in the city centre will attract hundreds of thousands of visitors a year, bring in a whole new library experience to Sunderland and encourage and enable engagement across all our communities in a high quality, family friendly environment with world-class digital technology and creativity at its heart. We will of course ensure Sunderland offers activities ranging from arts, libraries and music through to museums and heritage, from participation in sport and physical activity to world-class spectator events, creating opportunities for all, that's either to watch or to take part in. Madam Mayor, as has already been emphasised, the financial position... I'm not doing anything. You're just looking at us. You make us laugh. Madam Mayor, as has already been emphasised, the financial position for councils across the city remains extremely challenging. However, we will continue to work hard to ensure we provide our residents, businesses and visitors with a vibrant and inclusive cultural and wellness offer across the city, which also supports the city's economic growth and regeneration aspirations. With that, Madam Mayor, I would like to commend the budget proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Next, we will deal with amendments to the budget proposals that were moved by the Leader. Notice has been received of the proposed amendments and all council members have been sent a copy. I would remind council that a recorded vote will be taken on each amendment and then a single vote on the substantive motion. We will deal with the majority opposition group's amendment first. Councillor Mullen, will you please move the proposals in your group's amendment to the revenue and capital budget by reading them out?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and I'll move both together if that's all right. Under revenue, to reallocate part of the neighbourhood fund to neighbourhood priorities which are outlined below, a reduction in the corporate affairs and communications budget, cuts to councillors' allowances which take place as follows: merging the deputy leader and cabinet secretary roles to create a deputy leader and corporate services role, to merge the 4 existing cabinet positions into 3 to reflect the new chief officer group structure: environmental services and city development, children, education and culture, and Health, Housing and Communities, to reduce the Leader's Special Responsibility Allowance by £2,667, leading to an automatic reduction in the Majority Opposition Leader SRA, to delete the Minority Opposition Leader SRA, to delete...
Thank you, everyone.
To delete the 4 Deputy Cabinet Member posts, to reduce the Scrutiny Coordinating Chair Special Responsibility Allowance by £9,556, to reduce the Thematic Scrutiny Chair SRAs totalling £6,537, to reduce the 5 Area Committee Chair SRAs totalling £36,750, reduce the Licensing Committee and Planning and Highways Chair Special Responsibility Allowances by £5,369, delete the Special Responsibility Allowances for Vice Chairs of Scrutiny Coordinating, Planning and Highways, Licensing and Area Committees totalling £43,939, reduce the mayoral allowance by £7,500 and delete the deputy mayoral allowance entirely, to reallocate part of the public health budget to a suicide prevention package, which is also outlined below, to move to a full paperless model for e-magazine and meeting agendas, reduce the member support budget and move towards pre-recorded training tutorials, a reduction in the business investment budget relating and including the £59,908 that continues to be spent on Japan, America and international travel, reduction in trade union facility time, a revised profit projection for the port, end chauffeured executive cars for the Mayor and Labour Cabinet members, and abolish the Councillor's expenses budget. And then to reallocate those savings in terms of revenue on reducing Labour's council tax increase, a suicide prevention scheme which will include continuing the suicide prevention work currently funded by the Department for Health and Social Care, and a suicide prevention infrastructure feasibility study relating to Wearmouth Bridge, making parking permits for residents in CPMS areas free across the city, 3 park and cemetery wardens, expanding the council's arborist team, introducing 100 new bins across the city, a sponsorship manager for the Sunderland Airshow and other events, to develop a digital tourism campaign for Sunderland, introducing 10 new school street schemes across the city, the installation and maintenance of 10 new grip bins, an asset transfer of the southern area playing fields to a trust established by Washington United Football Club, increasing CCTV monitoring capacity, increasing the carbon reduction budget, and introducing an innovation reward scheme to improve council efficiency. And then under capital, Madam Mayor, to delete the remaining FPIT budget and to reallocate the vehicle-activated sign budget to a general anti-speeding infrastructure fund, which is outlined below. And then capital spending amounts to traffic light system at the Broadway roundabout, a road and repair fund, anti-speeding infrastructure fund, extending the Roker Park Lodge funding to pay for the community allotment, number plate recognition cameras for the School Street Scheme enforcement, the pedestrianisation of Marine Walk, the Fulwell War Memorial upgrade, CCTV camera infrastructure at the Holiday Inn in Washington, and to develop and deliver on a commercial basis a Padel tennis court at Sutsworth Tennis Centre.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Doyle, do you second the motion?
I second the amendment, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mullen, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm going to broadly introduce the things that we've included in our amendment, and then specific members of my group will pick up the things that they requested go in it in a bit more depth. So, firstly, my group proposes putting residents' interest before those of politicians' interest, bringing back the removal of the chauffeur-driven car, as we proposed at the last council meeting, and deeper cuts to councillors' allowances and expenses than any other group is proposing. And as part of that, we're suggesting that we reduce the number of cabinet members to reflect the new structure of the chief officer group. And we do so on the basis that some cabinet members are clearly not familiar enough with their brief to justify the cabinet remaining at its current size. Not only has it taken a month to answer the questions that some of us asked at the last meeting, but I remind Councillor Kevin Johnson that he has still not answered my question about the planning portal, which I asked over a year ago. In addition to this, we are scrapping the £42,000 spent on the chauffeured car service and reducing the council tax increase by another 2%. We're saving £139,000 by going paperless, which includes scrapping the council magazine, as was suggested by the Scrutiny Coordinating Committee, and adopting digital agenda packs, which benefits us both financially as well as environmentally. And that's important because at the last meeting of council, when the Conservative group proposed the measure to cut the cars and the council agendas, Councillor Stewart said that he would be interested in seeing what we did with the carbon reduction budget at this meeting. So just for him, we're pleased to announce that we've increased the carbon reduction budget and offer the biggest carbon reduction budget of any of the main groups.
Thank you.
Clearly linked to that, we're also repeating our savings for our calls for savings in relation to international travel, which is undertaken by representatives of the council, which still stands at tens of thousands of pounds and seems to be completely needless in a world of Zoom. By making these savings and others that colleagues will talk about in more depth and in more detail, we're able to halt the council tax hike and invest in what we know are residents' priorities. And for my part, I will outline 6 of those. The first is scrapping entirely the cost of all parking permit charges for CPMS schemes and making it free. These schemes are supposed to protect residents, not to make money off them. Income for the council, as you can see in the budget amendment, is actually relatively small, but the savings for families is huge, and the principle of doing this is right as well. We should not be charging residents to park outside of their own homes, but especially not when the role of a CPMS is to act as a last resort solution to residents who are suffering from chronic parking problems that are not of their own doing because of where they happen to live. Secondly, is the traffic lights at the Broadway roundabout, which we proposed last year, and I highlighted then that we have constant collisions which the police sometimes will not attend because they're too minor, and when they do attend, they hardly record that they've happened. But this is even more necessary now that Labour councillors, backed up by one Lib Dem councillor, voted through an ASDA development on the corner of that roundabout, which not a single one of my residents wanted, but which will obviously make this problem worse. We're proposing a £1.5 million road pavement and pothole repair fund, and increasingly find that on area committees we're dealing with the need to resurface highways, demonstrating what is a very clear desire among councillors of all parties to spend more on roads. And so with an increase in that, alongside a £250,000 anti-speeding infrastructure fund, which might still include vehicle-activated signs, we're confident that we will be able to deal with both the highways quality and the speeding problems that residents report to us. We're moving that specific VAS allocation into a more general pot because some of us are starting to feel like a red LED frown isn't enough to stop speeding in the wards that we represent. We're proposing the introduction of 100 new bins across the city, specifically intended for residential areas to help keep litter off the streets, and to expand the council's arborist team, because we continue to face a backlog of works that's still incomplete following storms that took place last year, but which nonetheless exposed the fact that the council has a weakness when it comes to dealing with these problems and doesn't have the capacity to respond when it needs to. And finally, at no cost to the council whatsoever, and this might be something that the leader will take up anywhere, we're proposing an innovation reward scheme whereby a senior officer would act as they do at other councils and in the private sector as an innovation manager, and members of staff within the council below assistant director level would be able to propose formally innovations that could save the council money if they never know of a way that we can change processes or practices within the council. And if those ideas are implemented, then that employee would get a financial reward for doing so. So if, for example, a member of staff sets out a plan that saves the council £100,000 and this saving materialises, then that member of staff would get £20,000 in cash for identifying the saving. This would have to be below assistant director level because we couldn't have, for example, the chief executive proposing to save money by simply scrapping the entire cabinet. Whilst that would be reasonable, it would mean more money for Patrick, which wouldn't be justifiable under these conditions. And as I said, this is practiced with considerable success in other councils, and I will leave it to other colleagues to talk about the other recommendations we've made. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mullen. Councillor Doyle, would you like to speak on the amendment?
I would, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address in further detail some of the proposals set out in the Conservative Group's budget amendment. Sadly, or perhaps thankfully, depending on your perspective, my final budget amendment as it happens. This budget amendment, let me stress, better reflects the priorities of the city's residents and sets the council on a more efficient and therefore more robust financial footing for the forthcoming financial year. I start with the reduction in councillors' allowances, specifically those relating to the SRAs attached to the Planning and Highways Committee. Now, it is clear to all members of that committee that the role of the chair has the potential to require a not insignificant personal investment, determining requests for call-in from ward members, coordinating and attending site visits, receiving briefings from officers, all are time-consuming and essential to the proper functioning of the council as a local planning authority. We must, however, take into account this workload in reality and the new configuration of the planning committee's system in Sunderland. It seems indefensible now that we should maintain the previous level of allowances when there are fewer members to manage and condensed officer reports, questionable though this latter development is. Turning now to the cessation of use of executive cars by yourself, Madam Mayor, and senior councillors, as explained when debating the Conservative Group's motion at the last meeting of full council, for the council to make good on its carbon reduction targets, we need to adopt more environmentally conscious behaviours, and part of this is achieving a modal shift, something Councillor Stewart knows all about, as we found out last time, both within the council as an organisation and the city as a whole. And apart from anything else, the revenue saving capable of being generated here completely undermines any argument in favour of retaining the current arrangement. How colleagues opposite can claim that this is worthwhile use of taxpayers' money is beyond me, and I do sense that they find a luxury chauffeur service sitting uncomfortably with their socialist ideals. Comrades being whisked around the city in a slick saloon does not project an image of cutting-edge climate action. More so, it represents the excesses of a failed regime. Something that does signal commitment to the net zero agenda, though, is the money we set aside for the carbon reduction budget. It is bitterly disappointing that Labour, supposedly the party at the cutting edge of environmental activism, should be outdone by a set of supposed climate deniers. Paul Stewart's entire political outlook, clearly shaped by his blind dislike of Conservatives, no matter how painfully moderate, such as me, has been shattered by a solitary pound coin. His newfound commanding persona, aided by acute call and response with Councillor Farthing, which has not gone unnoticed, perhaps, or rather hopefully, never to be seen again. The School Streets Initiative is yet another example of the Conservative Group's ability to think in a pragmatic and innovative way to address Sunderland's priorities, and Councillor Peter Wood will speak on this proposal in more detail. But all I would say by way of an introduction is that School Streets is already being piloted in Sunderland, as some colleagues will know, and in other local authorities in the North East. Placing restrictions on through traffic at pick-up and drop-off times both improves the safety of children and parents and encourages use of transport alternatives. For some time now, I've been calling for the expansion of the ongoing pilot to include Fulwell Junior School and Seabundine Primary School, where I serve as Local Authority Link Governor, as a means of bringing to an end inconsiderate and occasionally illegal parking. The final point I would make, Madam Mayor, relates to the reduction in the council tax burden. Yet again, we have presented before Council a workable, carefully thought out budget that allows the people of Sunderland to keep more of the money that they've earned. If they vote against this amendment, I fear that opposition councillors will need to think hard about how they will defend a 3% council tax hike to their residents during a cost of living crisis. And with that, I wholeheartedly support this amendment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Thank you. I have been advised that the following councillors wish to speak on the amendment. Councillors Wood, Reid, S Johnston, Hartnack and Peacock. I was also advised that Councillor Mann would wish to speak, but can we confirm that she's not in attendance tonight?
Madam Mayor, yes, unfortunately, she's had to submit her apologies late.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Doyle. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? And if so, would you please indicate accordingly now?
Councillor Hodson, Councillor Checker, Deputy Leader, Cabinet Secretary, Councillor Farthing, Councillor Williams, Councillor Ty, Councillor Vera, Councillor Wilson,
Okay.
So, Madam Mayor, the speakers we have are Councillors P. Wood, Reid, S. Johnston, Hartnack, Peacock, Hodson, Checker, Rowntree, Stewart, Farthing, Williams, Ty, Vera and Wilson, and the Leader has the right of reply.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll begin with Councillor P. Wood, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to support the amendment that my group has put forward before this evening's meeting, and speak on two items, as Councillor Doyle has inferred already, on school streets, but also to say something briefly about the port. One issue, I think, which is getting steadily worse across the city is the question of parking outside of schools at both the start and end of the school day. I believe for some time, and indeed discussed with council officers, that we should be following the example of other councils up and down the country and to try a school streets approach. In other words, to restrict access to those school streets, the streets in which the schools are located, at the start and end of the school day, essentially to residents and emergency vehicles. There may also need to be some business access. I accept that, Madam Mayor. Now, to be effective, of course, such a scheme would need to be enforced. And in the case of the pilot at St Bede's School in Washington, it was enforced, I think, effectively by the presence of council staff. Now, it would be better if we used technology, I think, to effect this. It would be more accurate. With all due respect to council staff, there are only a certain number of them. More reliable, cheaper, and a more effective use would be made of number plate recognition cameras, which are effectively what are proposed in the amendment in the papers that we have before us. Monitoring always does work, I think you'll find, Madam Mayor, in terms of parking controls, parking restrictions. And councillors, I suppose, can help in enforcement. Civil enforcement officers, but their numbers are limited across the city, Madam Mayor, as you know, and the police also can help to enforce. It's not feasible, I think, to expect that combination to effectively promote parking enforcement in the long term. Cameras, to my mind, would be the ideal solution in the longer term. There are simply not enough civil enforcement officers, effectively, though I understand we do seek to recruit them on a regular basis, Madam Mayor. And the Chief Constable, unfortunately, will not allow PCSOs, who are usually the members of the police force, present when enforcement is needed, when there are problems outside schools. The Chief Constable will not allow those PCSOs to issue tickets. That's unfortunate, Madam Mayor, but it is the situation, and it is under the control of the Chief Constable. So those are my reasons for supporting the amendment in relation to school streets. Could I say something briefly about the port before sitting down? I find that I agree largely with the comments that Councillor Rowntree made about the port earlier in the meeting, and most aspects of the port operation are not contentious, it seems to me, in any way. A profitable port is an asset to a city, and Sunderland's port is profitable. We have recovered well from the lost shipments as a result of the Ukraine war, and the net profit of £480,000, I think, is expected this year, according to the papers at the last port board meeting. Now, in the budget for the coming year, the profit budgeted for is simply £100,000, significantly smaller than the likely profit to be made this year. Now, I think it's right, certainly, Madam Mayor, that we should be cautious, but not excessively so. And past experience, to my mind, shows that we can realistically budget for a modest increase in the profit, that is currently allowed for. So I'm happy to support the group's proposal of budgeting for a further £50,000 there. Those are my arguments, those are my reasons, Madam Mayor, for supporting the amendment. I think it's a well-reasoned, a well-argued, a well-thought-through amendment, and I think it's worthy of Council's support. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reid, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If there are two issues that come up most from my residents, it's speeding and taking care of our green spaces. As councillors, we constantly push for speed surveys, for speed bumps and speed cameras. And yet, in some very small ways, we encounter problems and delays. We even got bounced back by officers for simply wanting one additional 30-mile-an-hour sign coming off of a roundabout, just to remind drivers of the speed limit. But we encountered a problem there. In our alternative budget, the pot of money set aside for anti-speeding infrastructure will give councillors greater flexibility in how they tackle speeding in their wards, a large ring-fenced and dedicated pot of money that shows we are serious about tackling speeding in the city and would give councillors more power in their own areas. Moving on to park and cemetery wardens, a staple in recent Conservative alternative budgets. This again puts a key issue raised by residents at the forefront of council policy, protecting our parks and green spaces. In Backhouse Park, recently we had an arson attack that destroyed the children's play area, unfortunately. We have worked and we have secured a CCTV camera to be installed near the children's play park to protect it, but there needs to be additional measures across the city to deter antisocial behaviour and in cases to support the police in their efforts. These wardens would maintain the standards of our parks, saving the council money in the long run, as we won't need to constantly repair damage and replace equipment. I would also like to end briefly talking about the School Street scheme. Councillor Wood has talked quite thoroughly about that. But it's a standout feature in our budget. It's designed to tackle the ridiculous parking situation at times around schools. Credit where credit is due. The council has done their own trial in Washington. And I think the results of that have showed that it was quite labour intensive and it might not have been a solution that we could have used across the city. The technology does exist where we could purchase several cameras that would sort of be a bit more of a comprehensive solution to this persistent problem. Certainly in inner city wards such as St Michael's and Millfields, the problem is horrendous in many areas. At best, it greatly inconveniences residents, and at worst, it puts children at risk. As someone who themselves was knocked down by a car as a child during the school rush, I'm really glad that we've managed to find the situation where we have the technology where we can do something about this problem. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor S. Johnson, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to speak to the culture, events and sporting offer that our budget amendment provides. Whilst I appreciate the Labour Party's attempt to invest in this area with their budget, they've got it wrong. Their proposals are wasteful and won't create the level of positive change that ours will. Firstly, we're removing the funding for the FPIT proposal. The costs are far too high. It's led to a lot of people in our group wondering if we should rename it the bottomless pit. That's £4.5 million we can use to deliver on things that will make a greater positive impact to residents' living experience in our city. Secondly, we're reducing the events budget by £500,000. The past year has shown we can achieve more while spending less. Just look at the £142,000 that was wasted on the cancelled Lamplight Festival and how much more we could achieve if we worked harder to secure sponsorship and pursued all the available revenue streams at the events we host. With that in mind, I'll move to the first of our spending proposals, which is the sponsorship manager for the air show. The cancellation of this event was a major blow to St Peter's and indeed the wider city. And along with the plans to move the Glass Centre to the city centre, it shows the Labour Council doesn't really care about the seafront offer and the residents of this ward. A sponsorship manager would allow us to get the event back on the calendar. It would keep our name on the map, not Teesside's, and take commercial opportunities that an event like this provides to us. We'll accompany this with a new digital tourism budget. There's a lot to celebrate about Sunderland, and we don't do enough to sell that to people elsewhere. Digital advertising will allow us to reach people around the country, around the world, and entice them to visiting our beautiful seaside city. On the other hand, we're keen to support sport in the city too. Our amendment firstly works to deliver on the asset transfer of the southern area playing fields, an idea that I thank our Washington South candidate Peter Noble for tirelessly championing. Given control of the playing fields, the Washington United Football Club will allow to a massive investment in a multi-sport facility and the development of a superb community asset that will be enjoyed by a lot of people. And finally, we're calling for the construction of a padel tennis court in Silksworth Ward, which would come at no cost to taxpayers. We'll be doing it on a commercial basis. Residents, if they want to take part in this sport, which is one of the fastest growing on the planet, have to travel all the way to Middlesbrough. I know that because myself and Councillor Doyle have done it multiple times, and I know a lot of people would enjoy something like this closer to home. The current situation isn't good enough. We need to jump on the opportunity to provide a new and enriching sporting activity for the enjoyment and health of residents in the city. And with that, I support this well thought out, very effective budget amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hartnock. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a plea, colleagues, a plea for common sense, a plea for ensuring we meet the needs of the people we were elected to represent, and a plea, Madam Mayor, to do the right things, in particular looking after the health, well-being and safety of our residents across the city. We're only 6 weeks into 2023 and already we've had 3 suicides from 2 of our bridges. I've personally been involved in both rescuing suicidal individuals from our bridges and the recovery of numerous bodies from our river. The impact of suicide to families and professionals is profound, and I don't think I need to remind people of that. But I think we do need to start and take this matter more seriously than perhaps we have previously. And therefore, I fully support with my party the allocation of a modest £150,000 to support a suicide prevention scheme and to undertake a feasibility study to prevent suicides occurring specifically at our bridge locations. In respect of school streets, safety of school children and adults at school sites, the situation is getting ever more serious with near misses of road traffic collisions at many schools across the city. At Fowl Infant School, which is in my own ward, all efforts to deter motorists from parking illegally at the school have failed, and much needed enforcement of the law remains the only solution. Yet the council failed to undertake such work effectively for reasons that have already been outlined, largely the unavailability of staff, etc. But we fully support the need for safety around school sites across the city, which is why we are suggesting again a quite modest allocation of £120,000 to actually support a programme of safe school streets. Finally, in respect of remembering our war dead, Fulwell's only war memorial is quite simply in a disgraceful condition and desperately needs refurbishing. The Conservative group therefore supports the proposal to commit £50,000 capital to improve this memorial site. This is a site which is passed by many people visiting the seafront, and it's in a really, really poor state. But I'm happy to support the amendment, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hartnock. Councillor Peacock. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd first like to acknowledge the hard work that's gone into producing this amendment from the Sunderland Conservative Group, which is designed to meet the needs of our city and fellow residents, tackling the areas we know from neighbours' feedback are most important to them.
In particular, there are three areas which I want to highlight and the reason for them. Our amended budget sets aside £10,000, a small amount in the scheme of things. This is for to introduce the 10 school schemes across the city. These schemes are aimed at tackling the worsening issue of safety, congestion and access around schools. Most of us sitting here have at least one school in our ward, and all will be aware of the issues around dropping off and picking up our children safely. Whether this be from dangerous traffic on the roads, large crowds obstructing the view and ability to meet our children, or more recently discussed the issue of poor quality air from stationary vehicles and other contaminating factors like smoking, vaping, and people gathering around entrances. This is not a new issue, Madam Mayor, and many will agree it is worsening, so we need to act to improve the safety of our children, and indeed the safety of the school staff who wait with them. I believe this is a very positive step towards that goal. The second issue I wanted to highlight sets aside £76,208 revenue spending to expand the Council's arborist team. Though this may not seem like a priority right now, the arrival of Storm Otto this week reminded us all of this time last year when 3 consecutive storms wreaked havoc and destruction across the region. The trees that were felled or damaged during that time have generally been neglected for years, and some are still waiting to be dealt with completely. Residents shared their concerns this week with me that there are many trees across the city that survived last year, but they are living in constant fear of them coming down every time the wind gets up. Therefore, by investing in the hard-working arborist team, our group is hoping to tackle some of these issues before they arise, deal with the outstanding damaged trees, and improve the maintenance programme in order to keep our mature trees looking fantastic for as long as possible. The third area I wanted to highlight has already been discussed, but I do want to mention it. This comes under our capital spending and hopes to address the long-standing issue of the Who Dares Wins roundabout at the junction of the Broadway with Chester Road and Springwell Road. This junction falls at the corner of 3 wards, St Anne's, Barnes and Pallion, and it's my understanding that all of the councillors from those 3 wards agree that this is a long overdue improvement. Residents have raised the hazardous roundabout many times, and I'd be very surprised if anyone in this chamber who can drive has not chanced their luck across it at some point. The amount quoted to introduce the traffic light system here is £2.4 million, and although this amount could buy many things, an air show for example, or a year in City Hall, I think it is nothing more when compared to the many incidents and accidents that have been witnessed here over the years, Madam Mayor. I hope these issues highlight to colleagues and viewers watching at home how seriously our Sunderland Conservative group take the concerns of the neighbours. This amendment is designed with us all in mind, tackling real issues that affect real people. I will therefore be supporting the Sunderland Conservative group's amendment as proposed and urge colleagues to think about what we are really doing for residents and join me in supporting it too. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Peacock. Councillor Hodson, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Sunderland. The Liberal Democrat group will support this amendment from the Conservative group, although there are aspects of it that we do disagree with. The overriding thing really is the attempt to reduce the council tax rise. Now, on page 21 of the budget document we have in front of us, it does say that the Scrutiny Coordinating Committee had recommended to Council that we try to look seriously at reducing the council tax rise. I remember speaking from this exact spot last year about the same thing. What's frustrating from my point of view, Mayor Sunderland, is that tonight, the Conservatives are going to move this amendment to try and reduce the council tax rise. It will inevitably fail, I'm afraid. I'm sure you're plainly aware of that. The Liberal Democrat group are going to move shortly a very similar amendment to try and do the same thing. We can tell, because it was recommended by the Scrutiny Coordinating Committee, that the Labour group will, in private, have had a conversation about whether this can be done. Paul Stewart said that part of the reason they're making use of reserves is to stop going to the full 5% rise and keep it at 3%. Of course, the Council is proposing in this budget document to make a £9 million or so use of reserves. It's a £2 million saving that Paul is referring to. So clearly it is possible. In fact, the frustrating thing is when you look at what Labour have obviously been talking about, what we have been talking about, what the Conservatives are obviously talking about, we could, if there was any way to find agreement here, not be raising council tax. There's clearly the wit and wisdom is in this room not to make this happen. We keep proposing it year on year. I hope, Mayor Sunderland, that between now and the next 12 months, I'm not standing here saying the same thing again. We will vote for this amendment principally because the most important thing at the moment is the pay packet in everybody's pockets. We know it's being squeezed from all sorts of different directions. If there's a way we can avoid raising council tax for our residents, I think it's the most important thing any of us across the three political groups can do. So on that basis alone, my group will be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Checker. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And it disappoints me that once again we're here discussing a sensitive subject such as suicide prevention, which is currently the subject to significant work and investment by this council. And I'm disappointed to see that in the amendment here today. Every time we discuss this, our council and our partners this gives me the opportunity to highlight the work that is already happening. This already exists, and our priority is already on focusing and understanding our population and doing all we can to prevent deaths by suicide. Madam Mayor, I cannot underestimate the work that's been undertaken by this council and our partners on the Suicide Prevention Action Group with the investment that we're already delivering to prevent a wide-ranging suicide action plan. This approach has included understanding the specific issues for Sunderland and our residents through needs assessment, suicide audit processes and engagement in developing evidence-based suicide prevention programmes. Madam Mayor, following my presentation to Cabinet in December, where I shared both the action plan and the proposals to submit an application to the Prevention Concordat for Better Mental Health, we submitted this to the Department of Health and Social Care on the 15th of December. That panel met in January and we were accepted as a signatory to the Concordat with excellent feedback from the expert panel for our strong application. Madam Mayor, I am very happy to share both our strong application, our feedback and our action plan with anyone that comes to me to discuss it. Madam Mayor, suicide rates in Sunderland have actually decreased, and in 2021 and 2022 are now below the regional average and more similar to the national average. We've got a number of mental health programmes established in Sunderland following the national grant, which they do mention, which was focused on recovery and better mental health during 21-22. And I actually commissioned an evaluation of these programmes. That's now been finalised. And again, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to share this with any colleagues that come forward to discuss this with me. The recommendations within this also form part of our action plan that went to the Prevention Concordat. One of the recommended areas for prioritisation, which we will be considering as required for support for those at times of crisis, is that a lack of services exist to those in a time of crisis, that waiting times for primary healthcare services mean that it can take a long time for individuals to receive help, and that this can be too late for some, particularly for those who require immediate support. Madam Mayor, our colleagues should be working with me to address this and getting our health services, and particularly our mental health services, the funding they need from central government. Madam Mayor, one area that is of course of concern to us all, and one which our colleagues have raised here, has been the part in our action plan to prevent suicides by people from jumping from a height, particularly from our bridges. In our most recent suicide audit, 7% of our suicides were very sadly of this type, and I'm very sad to be here discussing this today. In March 22, as we said we would, preventative signage from the Samaritans was updated on the Queen Alexandra and the Monk Wearmouth bridges. Work is ongoing, subject to planning permission, to put in place additional upstream signage in relation to bridges. In relation to physical barriers, I would remind our council that we've got more than one bridge in Sunderland, and that suicides in Sunderland happen in more than just bridges. However, I'm aware that this is something that people are very focused on because it is clearly very high priority to people. There are options available: physical barrier fencing and safety netting, and there are already feasibility studies being undertaken on this. We are not the only city with bridges. We are not the only city with a river, and we're not the only city where people die by this method. So these feasibilities are already happening. In fact, one of those reviews just in 2020, which was a Cochrane review, Madam Mayor, this was a very high-profile review done by experts, actually says that further well-designed, high-quality studies are required to further evaluate the effectiveness of these interventions, and that further research is required. Now, I don't know what the costs of these type of interventions should be, should we decide to contribute or indeed undertake one of our own, but they are going to be significantly more than the £150,000 that's been suggested in this budget amendment. This council will always follow the national studies, and we will always follow the evidence-based for interventions, which is what we're already doing. We've also got a number of public health investments supporting mental health, well-being and preventing suicide. Some of those are specifically focused on mental health and well-being of people, including those who use drug and alcohol services. These are already totalling well over £200,000, Madam Mayor, far more than suggested in this budget amendment. And there is more specific suicide prevention work being undertaken by our partners as well. However, this is also only the tip of the iceberg, because we've already committed significant additional funding focusing on social prescribing, drug and alcohol services, physical activity, voluntary sector programmes, and we've got more call for projects out in relation to our warm spaces,
Councillor
focusing
Checker,
on
time is up.
mental health and well-being and social isolation. Madam Mayor, if I can just make one more point, and that is that every death from suicide is a tragedy, and our priority continues to be, as it always has been, that nobody ever gets to the bridge. And I can assure my colleagues here today that our suicide prevention programme always includes following best practice, doesn't require amendments from the opposition, and I thank my colleagues opposite for allowing me the opportunity to showcase the good work of my teams and my partners, and I will clearly not be supporting this amendment, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much.
Deputy Leader, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very surprised, actually, to see the rejection of the carbon agenda, given what a hot topic it is in Council. So I'm just wondering if we did that, what the opposition would find to talk about in subsequent councils, to be honest. But there's a number of other aspects on the budget I could speak to, and there's rather a lot, but I'll keep it sort of to the low carbon point. So, Madam Mayor, work on the citywide low carbon framework and City Council low carbon action plan is being taken forward by the low carbon team within the economic regeneration, which ensures a strategic and coordinated approach. This includes data and intelligence, monitoring and reporting, externally funded projects, project officers working closely with specialist leads in service areas, specialist staff focused on retrofitting and green infrastructure, and direct engagement with the organisation and externally, including with young people, as well as coordination of Cityside 2020 Shadow Board, Internal Carbon Task Group and Young People's Environmental Green and Sustainable Group. Just some of the successes, Madam Mayor, from the team include the Warm Homes Fund for £880,000 to privately owned or rented households with energy efficient measures, including access to valuable advice and guidance through Citizens Advice Bureau Groundworks Green Doctors. In partnership with Gen 2, the Council have been successful with an application to the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund Wave 1 programme, which will enable an overall total of £2.66 million to be invested in the period to support households across the city, improving their EPC rating. The Council also secured £2.2 million funding and is currently installing solar and battery storage at its business centre, Evolve, Sunderland Software Centre and Washington Business Centre, as well as at Jack Crawford House and a Transit Shed 7 at the Port of Sunderland. Small and medium-sized businesses have also been supported through externally funded projects at both the regional and city level. Sunderland achieved the highest level of support for business across the region through the BEST project, with 44 companies receiving audits valued at £66,000. And in addition, 21 BEST MSEs received grants totalling £102,500 for projects valued at £205,000 of energy efficiency works installed. The Citywide Breeze project remains open to applications. Installation of EV charging infrastructure in the Farringdon Row MSCP and the Homeside car park with over 200 charging points in total. Previous significant investment in the LED street lighting replacement programme. Some of our priorities for 2023 and 24 include the built environment with the decarbonisation of the Council's operational estate through the BAI Nomad programme of works, which draws on citywide connectivity and is a sensor-led to enable data gathering analysis on energy consumption within 14 buildings to identify energy and cost savings and decarbonisation activity. This reflects the significance of the purchased electricity and gas in the Council's emissions. Decarbonisation of transport, a citywide feasibility exercise is currently being carried out for EV residential community hubs, which would facilitate charging, particularly for those who don't have access to off-street parking. A detailed review of work is also being progressed in relation to the Council's fleet, and based on the outcomes of this work, appropriate investments and activity will be developed, reflecting the significance of transport in citywide emissions and fleet emissions. In terms of energy, a study is currently underway. Based on the outcomes of this work, appropriate investment opportunities and activity will be developed aligned to our local carbon goals. Investment in our green infrastructure will also continue alongside work to encourage active transport in parallel to other individual actions set out in the approved Low Carbon Action Plan. Madam Mayor, you heard earlier as well from my report the immense investment into the green industry in our city. And I think, Madam Mayor, we can agree that this budget allocation is more than worthwhile in the work in this area and is generating jobs, quality, energy-efficient homes and quality green spaces for us all to enjoy. As a ruling group, we take our responsibility for climate change extremely seriously. We will not deny this and turn our backs on future generations. We will continue to lead in this area and build a cleaner, greener city where our residents thrive and not just survive. And I'll just finish, Madam Mayor, with the proverb where a society grows great when we plant trees in whose shade we know we will never sit. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy.
Point of order. Point of order, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, missed that one.
Point of order, please.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam. Just a point of clarification. Did the Deputy Leader intend that speech to be for our amendment? Because some of the items were actually in the Lib Dem amendment, and we've actually increased the carbon reduction budget, not reduced it. But you did... I'm sure you will, Paul, but Claire has just implied that we've deleted the carbon reduction budget. We've actually increased it by £1.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you. Did you, Councillor Hodson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Sunderland. Under Rule 14.23 of the Rules of Procedure, can I suggest that the question now be put?
Thank you. I have considered on this. We have heard a lot from the party proposing the amendment, but very little response so far. So I would like to carry on a little further because I believe there are other points to be raised. Thank you. Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. £1. Well, there we are. That shows how much of a... Oh, sorry.
Just the whip round.
10, oops, not on there. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, £1. £1.20. Well, all I can say about that is, under Labour, Madam Mayor, you get 20% more. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll make sure that this goes into the budget. There we are. Okay, that deals with that. Okay. Let's go to a few more serious points now. I think one point, and it probably applies, Madam Mayor, to both of these budgets, is that in the main budget, there's an equality assessment made in relation to the proposals and the potential impact in relation to equality on the workforce. And I think maybe something for the future is when all these amendments, there's lots of figures, but it actually doesn't necessarily show the impact that actually would have on the workforce within the council, and perhaps something that we want to look at for the future. But anyway, coming to the amendments for the Conservatives, I mean, start off with the council allowances. If anything, you've been consistent over the years with regards to this. indeed quite focused as well as the Liberal Democrats. So I decided to do some research in relation to council allowances, because clearly it's a big issue for both parties, in relation to just what's out there. You know, is Sunderland excessive with regards to council allowances? So I looked about and tried to find a policy think tank or an interest group that was beyond reproach, Madam Mayor, so that their figures wouldn't be questioned. So I decided to take a look at the figures buried within a report from 2020 from that great champion of truth, Madam Mayor, the Taxpayers Alliance. Madam Mayor, big councils with lots of councillors inevitably have higher council allowances, and being in a city, predominantly they are Labour. However, looking deep into the data and looking at the cost per councillor, you end up with a surprise, Madam Mayor. Looking at the list on the Taxpayers Alliance website, the council with the highest allowances per councillor is Tory Nottinghamshire. There we are. Surprise, surprise. Okay, second in the list is Tory Kent. Whoa! Third, Croydon, but you always have a rotten apple in the barrel, but never mind. But the list goes on, Tory council after Tory council, until you get to number 8, the first council within the North East. And is it Sunderland? No. It's Tory Northumberland. Yes. Indeed, you've got to go all the way to list. You've got to go to number 99 in the councils before you get to Sunderland. So that's the reality when it comes to council allowances.
You learn something new every day, Councillor O'Brien.
Okay. Indeed, the council allowances within Sunderland are just short of half that of Tory Northamptonshire and Tory Kent. So let's get it in perspective, shall we? So I think you need to stop being a broken record with this year after year, because at the end of the day, Sunderland is not an authority that has high council allowances, and I think that is a fact now, according to the Taxpayers Alliance. If I can turn to the another point, and that's the chauffeur-driven car for the mayor. This is actually a new one. For the budget. I mean, again, the Conservatives, like the Liberal Democrats, it seems to be the same old ideas year in, year out. But this is a new one, and again, triggered by the Taxpayers Alliance. But again, it's not well thought through. Madam Mayor, I'm trying to picture a scenario of you walking in the rain with your gown, attending, for example, Willowwood Primary School, perhaps, with the children there, and having to wait in the rain in John Street for the number 4 bus to get you there, and whether that's the appropriate thing we want for the mayor of this city. Well, clearly they don't, but never mind. And anyway, let's talk about the costs. The cost of £42,190. Well, I asked the same question in relation to this, and I got presumably the same answer you did.
Councillor Stewart, you've had 5 minutes.
In relation to what those costs are.
You've had 5 minutes.
I've got 5 minutes, so I've had 5.
You've had 5 minutes.
I've had 5. Okay. Can I have another couple of minutes?
Yes.
There we thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to make the point, and that is this, in relation to this, is that the majority of the costs associated with this is not excess travel by fat councillors or skinny councillors or indeed councillors with bad legs or whatever. The vast majority of these costs are actually staffing, and it's not funny. A lot of these proposals here, and in the Liberal Democrats' amendments as well, it's staff in this council who are going to lose their jobs if they're passed. And you know it, because you set them in. Well, I've checked this one out, and its staffing is half the costs, and you should be ashamed of yourselves. But anyway, I'll finish with one final point, is the question you didn't ask is actually how much it would cost to implement in relation to the use of public transport for the mayor and deputy mayor, the cost of additional security, because who's going to look after those chains on the metro? Thank you very much. And actually, when you work those costs out, because clearly you didn't bother asking the question, when you work out those questions, the actual savings in relation to the mayor, it actually drops to £10,032.54. And I thought, well, fair enough, that's a saving, until I remembered I hadn't even factored in the deputy mayor. So actually, your idea would actually cost more to implement than what we currently do. So thank you. I'll sit down now.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. One or two more. Yeah. I'll just take one or two more, because this is a very long list. Councillor Farthing. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think during the Cabinet meetings when we've been discussing the budget proposals, which you've done since last year, we do it on a regular basis. We look at the budget, we monitor the current budget, and we look at the future budget. And I listen to the Tories across the way. I think they've got sort of a collective degenerative, a form of senility. They seem to have forgotten the reason that we've got the problems that we've got with budget planning. They often speak currently in national politics as though George Osborne was an alien force imposed on the Tory party. Yet it was his policies which created austerity. And we in our party have always said that austerity was a choice. And it seems that the Tories are saying the same thing now, that it is a choice. I want to sort of look at now, turn to Washington and the Tories' plans for Washington. I know that the Tories have lost the only Tory councillor that they had. Really? And I know that was, I believe, was through some sort of disciplinary concerns. And again, I was a bit surprised because Councillor Donnelly has always boasted of his period in the armed forces, so one would have expected that he was for discipline, but however, we are where we are. So I'm really surprised that, you know, having lost that council, they now want to sort of give up all hope of ever gaining a seat in Washington by removing the funding for the FPIT proposals. In Washington, the vast majority of our primary schools are actually built on former pit sites. So there is a sort of knowledge and a willingness to remember that culture. And certainly the examples that our local historic groups find, they're all surrounded by pit photographs of the pit villages. So it's a great, and the FPIT will actually keep forever that culture and that memory for Sunderland. And it'll be a place for our schools to visit and to sort of see the regular displays. So it's not, for me, you know, getting rid of that is definitely not a vote winner. And I do feel a bit sorry for poor Peter Noble being left, you know, sort of on his own. But I really feel that the Tories need to have a look at subsection 2 of the section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972, a Tory Government Act. And that says that an asset cannot be transferred for a consideration less than the best that can reasonably be obtained. The proposal in these amendments suggests that the council taxpayers of Sunderland should be funding the undervalue of the southern area playing fields. I'm just wondering if that's got something to do with the support that Washington United actually gave the Tory party last year. And finally, nobody across the side there has explained to us what benefit a CCTV camera will provide at the Holiday Inn. Now, if you were going to provide a CCTV camera, I would suggest it would be in Ayton Park, and I have been campaigning to get a camera in Ayton Park for some time, because if we've got any antisocial behaviour in Ayton, that's where it takes place. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
Point of personal explanation, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor Doyle. Thank you.
Point of personal explanation, if you don't mind, just regarding the best value requirement of the Local Government Act. Perhaps Councillor Farthing might like to look at the minimum land receipt requirements that were built into the option agreement that were created between Siglion and the Council in 2014. I think that would make for some very interesting reading if she's interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll take one more speaker on this topic. Councillor Tighe. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I just want to pick up a couple of things that's in the Conservative proposals, and I think the first thing that I think is worth pointing out, it's strange to see that the Vicarage Close in Silksworth has been forgotten about this year by the Conservatives. If we recall, we had a £30,000 compensation fund for them last year, which they've completely scratched out of their budget. Maybe it's because their candidate last year, Jack Sim, defected to the Labour Party last year. I'm wondering if that's the reason for that. But part of that money, and the point's just being made, is offset by proposals to provide a CCTV camera at the Holiday Inn to do Putin's dirty work of watching our Ukrainian guests under the Homes for Ukraine scheme, which I find is disgusting right-wing rhetoric coming from the Conservative Party. Disgusting. Other than that, I think there's over 98% of the budget proposals the Labour group have made, the Conservative group are actually supporting. Just under 2% of the proposals are trying to make some amendments to. So it shows, in fairness, that they widely accept our proposals for running this city, which is complete and utter madness. But I just want to leave on one last thing. I want to read a press release which has come from the County Councils Network and the Local Government Association, both managed and controlled currently, and I will say currently, by the Conservatives. And this press release was signed off by Councillor James Jameson, Chairman of the LGA, Conservative OBE. Millions of households face further cost of living pressures after research suggests 3/4 of councils will hike tax by almost 5% from April. The County Council Network has found 84 local authorities out of 114 plan to raise council tax by the maximum permitted, which is 4.99%. The Local Government Association said the government was banking on its members increasing charges as much as possible. Wow, that's a Tory saying that. Councillor James Jameson, Chairman of the LGA, which represents more than 350 councils, said an increase in local government core spending power will help councils deal with inflationary and other cost pressures they face next year. However, it is based on the assumption that councils will raise their council tax by the maximum permitted without a referendum. We have been clear that the council tax has never been the solution to meeting the long-term pressures facing services, particularly high-demand services like adult social care and child protection. This is the 5th one-year settlement in a row for councils, which continues to hamper financial planning and their financial stability and sustainability. Councils want to work with government on a long-term funding plan which ensures they have adequate resources, certainty and freedoms to deliver local services for our communities. Currently, authorities must hold local referendums if they want to increase council tax by more than 3%. But Chancellor Jeremy Hunt announced in the autumn statement he would raise this to 5%. And I'm just trying to make the point. They're trying to portray and trying to perceive and mislead the residents of Sunderland again, that these are our proposals and that you live in, I've said it before here, you live on this alien planet completely separate from the rest of your political party that's got the country in turmoil. Come to terms with it. And if you're not happy with your government, you're not happy with what they're saying, you can cross the floor and go and join the Independents or the Liberals, because you ain't welcome here.
Thank you, Councillor Tighe. We are running considerably behind time, so I'm taking no more speakers on this motion. Would you like the right of reply, please, Leader?
I will keep this brief. I did have copious notes otherwise. Madam Mayor, this is Groundhog Day. I mean, this is my 5th year of listening to this same old rhetoric coming from the same old party who are completely out of touch with the people of this country and with the people of Sunderland. And I thank you very much for that. I'll park that and come back to you later on it. And I haven't even started on your group yet, Councillor. Now, every year I have said in this meeting, rather than go through this nonsense of amendments which we get at the last minute, come and talk to cabinet members, come and talk to me. If there are genuine issues that we can do as amendments, we will look at them in a collegiate manner with you, and if we can bring them in, we will make those changes. And as per usual, we have had nothing. No cabinet members have received any conversations, none of the leadership, and I personally have seen no calls to say, Graham, can we come and talk about this? I wish you would do that, Niall. That would help enormously, right? Rather than do what you do, which means we go through this process rather than just agreeing a budget because we've done a little bit of compromise. You lot do not get it. Right? We have set a budget here which you're agreeing with the vast majority of. We cannot change any of this because to accept one bit of it, we've got to accept all of it. And if we accept all of it, it wrecks part of the budget. I wish you would grow up. I wish you'd actually understand what you're here to do. I have to say, I think it's too late for the Conservative Party. They, like the dinosaurs, are finding out what's happening when things change and you can't change quick enough. Right? And I'm sure that other parties in the room may benefit from that as things go forward. But I am very disappointed that yet again, I'm having to say it's the easiest thing in the world. Come and have a conversation. We've all been at this since January of this year in real detail, but Cabinet have been doing this with finance officers all year. Because this isn't something we just throw together and put on a desk and go, there you go, Chief Exec, get that through. It takes months to get the budget agreed because government are not helpful. Government keep on giving us financial settlements at the last possible minute. So we have to make assumptions and then hope to God that we're right on them, and normally we are. So this group will be not accepting any amendments, no matter how well-intentioned they are tonight. And I'm not going to say this again second time after we have the Liberal Democrat amendment. I'll just be saying no and sitting down now. So this is to all of you. Honestly, please take this a bit more seriously than what you're doing it, because on this side of the chamber, we take this incredibly seriously. And thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. We will now vote on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If the officer could confirm when the vote is running, please. So the vote is running now, Madam Mayor. Members, the vote will be closing in a moment.
Excuse me.
Members, the vote will be closing in a moment. Could the officer now close the vote, please? So, Madam Mayor, there are 29 votes in favour of the amendment, no abstentions, 40 votes against, and therefore the amendment is defeated.
Thank you. Councillor Hodson, will you please move the amendment to the revenue and capital budget by reading it out?
Yes, of course, Mayor Sunderland. It does make a little bit of a mockery of the process when the leader has just stood up and said his group will be voting against it before I've read it out and we've had a chance. I mean, a little sense of the purpose and the procedure of the meeting would be appreciated, even if it is just stage dressing. But anyway, we do have an amendment in front of us, Mayor of Sunderland. It is, like the Conservative one, in two parts, a revenue and a capital budget amendment. I'll be as brief as I can reading this through. The Liberal Democrat Group revenue amendment finds savings of 1.921 million. This is through reduction of support costs for area committees, through the reduction of area committees to 3 committees coterminous with parliamentary constituencies, a review and reduction of basic and special responsibility allowances relating to deputy cabinet members, the vice chair of the scrutiny coordinating committee, a reduction across the board in SRAs, a reduction in the basic allowance for all councillors, the roles of the mayor and deputy mayor to be replaced by unpaid elected chairpersons, and a reduction in councillor expenses. Beyond that, there's the reduction in the corporate communications budget, the scrapping of the Comres Residence Survey and the Council magazine, and the removal of the budget for carbon reduction. The total there is, as I said, £1,921,066. With that saving, the Liberal Democrat Group proposes the following revenue investments. Reduction in the council tax rise by 1%, making permanent the additional environmental services staff that our various area committees have been funding through their own budgets, allocating a further figure for 5 additional environmental services officers, particularly dog wardens, reversing the planned increase in allotment rent charges for this year and last year, providing a funding pot for disabled education travel support, a 0% rise in rents in social housing managed by the council, a big wheelie bin fund to assist households who need a larger bin, the introduction of a discretionary fund to allow for the increasing of lighting levels or additional lighting for partially sighted residents, a single free annual visitor permit in permit parking zones for households without a car, reversing this year's and last year's brown bin charge increase, a scheme to allow auto-renewal of resident parking permits and auto-renewal of the brown bin service, and finally a 1-year trial of the council grass cutting the Barnes Park extension, so that is level. The capital budget amendment is much the same as last year with a few slight changes. This is a realigning, a repurposing of part of the strategic acquisitions and developments budget, a budget which the council has been spending massively in the last few years. We'd like to take 12.248 million from this budget to establish a leisure investment strategy for Sunderland and Washington. Some of the aims of this strategy are a maintenance fund for improving smaller suburban parks, so not the big city parks, but some of the little ones in neighbourhoods that often get neglected and don't have a improvement budget. Development of a rewilding project in Fulwell around Keswick Avenue and Dean Lane and the former council playing field behind Morrison's as a sort of test bed to see if this is something we can do more widely around Sunderland as a sort of biodiversity exercise. A feasibility study into the acquisition of a public park in the Ford Pennywell area. Enhance the existing cycleway investment scheme, which is very good, but we'd like to see a keynote route breaking ground on Hilton Road. A project to enable better running and walking routes in Sunderland. Establishing a programme of dog parks, a city centre skate park, and that working group has a budget associated with it as well. Beyond that large project, we'd also like to, again, we'd like a working group and study to find a result for derelict and problem garages in residential areas such as Moorside, a feasibility study of the council supporting a supermarket in the city centre and similar in Hendon, a proposal acquiring and redeveloping the vacant Weir Tavern in Pallion for housing and commercial use, acquiring Burn Park Methodist Church for community use, and the installation of a pedestrian crossing at Hastings Hill. Mayor of Sunderland, that balances the budget there with £12,248,000, and I move the Lib Dem budget amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. We haven't had it seconded yet. Councillor Haswell, do you second the motion?
I'll second the motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hodson, would you like to speak on your amendment?
Well, I mean, there's a request to move a vote, Mayor Sunderland, but if you will indulge me to at least speak on the amendment before it is roundly rejected. Mayor Sunderland, it's been very nice at the start of this meeting, if I wind my way back to 4 p.m. when the leader started speaking about the budget, that he reeled out a number of fantastic Lib Dem wins. I've been proposing these budget amendments year after year, 5, 6 years on the trot, and you may have forgotten, but I haven't, that free pest control was a Liberal Democrat proposal. Free replacement bins was a Liberal Democrat proposal. Free bulky waste collections was a Liberal Democrat proposal. So this is great news for us. Thank you very much. You know, we're patient. These things that we're putting in our budget this year, we will bide our time. Next year, there'll be 1 or 2 of them. I don't know which, but at some point you're going to choose 2 or 3 of these things from this budget and put them in your budget. And that'll be great. You know, we don't really care which ones you take. You know, it's a pick and mix, and we're quite enjoying it. Generally, Mayor Sunderland, what we're seeing is the the Labour group and the Conservative group gradually coming round to our way of thinking. You know, because thinking of that Conservative group amendment, if I'd moved that in 2016.
Excuse me, Councillor, it's getting a little noisy in the chamber and it's overpowering. Would you like to recommence and quieten down, please?
I can speak louder.
Thank you.
The Conservative amendment, just to reflect back on that for a moment, if I'd moved that in 2016 or 2017 under the sort of Peter Wood era and Robert Oliver era Conservatives, they'd have been aghast at that. But now they're saying the same thing as us. But what's nicer is, Paul Stewart said, actions speaking louder than words, and the Labour Party are just gradually, quietly enacting Liberal Democrat policy. We're happy with it. Now, hang on a sec. Now, I'm glad you've piped up, Paul, because I did want to come back to you. Now, Paul previously made a fantastic defence of Labour's policy of not reintroducing a pest control. That didn't go so well. The previous leadership made a fantastic public defence of their dinner and free meals for councillors that didn't go so well. And today we've had Paul defending councillor allowances. I wonder how that's going to pan out in the grand scheme of things. I think I've already spoken when speaking to the Conservative amendment about council tax, but I actually completely take your point, Graham. We should do this more formally. It clearly isn't enough that I just ask it publicly on the record year after year. Now, one thing you will see in this big budget document on page 190 and 192 is that there is a formal budget consultation meeting with the trade unions, with the Sunderland Bid, with the North East Chamber of Commerce. Why don't we actually try and have something as part of that process? Could you just schedule us in? Could we ask your PA perhaps that perhaps there could be an opposition or an all-councillor forum where we could actually have that discussion perhaps as part of that same period? Something to take away and consider. Now, I think earlier on, the portfolio holder, Claire Roundtree, was speaking about the Liberal Democrat budget amendment to remove the carbon reduction budget, and I just want to pick up on that. We are not climate deniers. We want specifics, not tokenism or generalisations. What we're uncomfortable about with that budget is not the size of it, it's just that it's a sort of amorphous blob. That's certainly what it looks like to residents. Now, when you look at our budget, and specifically the capital budget amendment, that's all about active travel, rewilding, improvement of parks. It is actually effectively a carbon reduction budget, but it's just in specifics, tangible things that we can take to residents and that they'll understand. Because honestly, when you wave sort of £1 million carbon reduction budget in front of residents, it doesn't look good. It looks like sort of it's council speak. I would rather we presented this in a way, and maybe it is a presentation thing, in a way that it was far more digestible for residents and understandable, because we're falling into a trap of, and actually it's a bit of a trap of the far right like, of making sort of carbon reduction sound like a sort of policy wonky thing and not a sort of practical improvements to their neighbourhood. You'll notice on practical improvements to the neighbourhood, the Lib Dem amendment includes improving cleanliness. Now, that remains a key priority for our residents, as well as the money in their pocket, the cleanliness of our streets. There's a huge, on page 41 of the budget book, you have this enormous list of capital programme commitments. It is lavish, but we are selling ourselves short, Mayor Sunderland, if we can't keep the city clean, and we still can't. There needs to be more money put into environmental services and our street scene. You all know that in your wards, because I'm pestered about nothing else by residents so much as the cleanliness and the appearance of Sunderland. And there's no point throwing good money into big projects like the Riverside, like Vaux, the Vaux site, if we can't keep the city clean at a basic level. It's important also to reduce the cost of residents doing the right thing on that regard, like recycling, like garden waste, like using allotments, which is why our amendment seeks to reduce those costs. And again, keep money in people's pockets.
5 minutes, Councillor.
I know, I'm finished. If there's an opportunity, I know one or two members of my group would like to flesh out 1 or 2 more points on this budget, but otherwise I commend it to the council. I hope you'll consider it, and at least, Graham, some of the things I've suggested, even if we don't vote for this amendment. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Farthing. I think in fairness we had a huge debate for the Conservatives' amendment to prevent any debate at all for the Liberal Democrats is not democracy. So, thank you. Sit down. Sit down. Thank you. However, we do have a large list of people who have already indicated they wish to speak without asking from people from the floor. We have another meeting to convene at the end of this one. So unless people have something original to say around their amendment, we will restrict the list as we did prior. Firstly, Councillor Haswell, would you like to speak as the seconder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am just going to keep it to a couple of core points and items I'm focused on. Firstly, in the capital budget, there's a proposal to acquire and redevelop the Weir Tavern, also known as the Pallion Inn, in Pallion. It's a critical issue for residents in my ward, despite it admittedly being in the neighbouring ward. Sorry? It's in your ward. It's not. It's in Millfield, oddly. It's on the corner. But it is a critical issue for residents in Pallion, whether they be Pallion residents in Pallion or Pallion residents in Millfield. And the reason we're looking for it to be dealt with is it's been sat empty for approximately 15 years. It's falling into a state of disrepair with no realistic prospect of redevelopment on the horizon. The proposal allows... I'm back on. It allows for the creation of a new community asset for the area and become a key part of redeveloping Pallion. A further proposal detailed is the acquisition of a public park in the Ford Pennywell area. The Blackie Park in my ward has also once been a huge important asset to the community as useful outdoor space. However, it's fallen victim to neglect and vandalism following its transfer to Gen 2. I'd like to see that come back into council ownership and get the love and attention that we do give our local parks in the city and bring it back to being an asset for our community, because at the moment it's just sat derelict despite much complaining about it. On the revenue budget, I'd like to highlight the proposal about the proposed lot rent charge increase. We want to stop this year's increase and reverse last year's. Similarly, we want to do the same with the brown bins. We all saw during COVID the benefits that people experienced to their mental health through gardening or growing veg at home. And the rent charges are now becoming an economic barrier for people, whether they want to get a brown bin or whether they want to register on the long waiting list for an allotment. So we are impacting people, and those are likely to be the worst off when that amount of money is hurting it. So it's a not real opportunity to make a difference for people. So I appreciate we've already had the outcome, but I would urge that next year, if the Labour Group would consider some of those proposals. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. I've been advised that the following councillors wish to speak on the amendment. Councillors Fagan, O'Brien, Potts, Morrissey and Bond. And I've received notification that Councillors Mullen and Doyle wish to speak on the amendment. Does anyone else wish to speak? If so, would members please indicate accordingly? Councillor Williams.
Councillor Farthing.
Councillor Guy.
Councillor Guy.
Councillor Stewart.
Councillor Stewart.
Okay.
So, members, that the Mayor has reviewed the list of speakers and proposes that the following members be invited to speak. Councillors Fagan, O'Brien, Mullen, Williams and Guy, and then the leader has the right of reply.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fagan, would you like to begin? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just keep it really brief. It's just to discuss one particular item that is particularly pertinent, especially the Doxford ward, is the problem of derelict garages. We've put together 30,000 for a feasibility study for this issue. It's a problem within the Doxford ward, within Moorside, and I'm sure it's an issue that excuse me, is it the people?
I've just asked them to be quiet, yes, thank you.
It's a problem that's within, namely Moorside, one of the estates, and I'm sure it's an issue that happens across some of the other estates in the city as well. There's a lot of derelict garages which are posing a health and safety risk, as well as attracting antisocial behaviour and break-ins. And residents are really frustrated. These are not council-owned garages, they're privately owned garages. There's a lot of red tape involved, leaseholders, freeholders, and the residents, it's just impossible for them to untangle this. And they really need the council's help from a feasibility study to see how we can tackle this problem. And so basically that's why we're putting that 30,000 there, to be able to help that. It's a very complex issue. It needs experts to be able to help the residents and support them in this issue. And then it'll pick up the whole estate, and and across the city we can apply the same if there's learnings there as well for other areas. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor O'Brien.
Well, Madam Mayor, I feel slightly, what's the word? Gutted that we're going to delete you after tonight. You've been a fantastic chair, I must say.
I've got one more.
Just to add quickly about the Hastings Hill subway, we've asked several times to meet with the portfolio holder about this. You'll remember last year, and it was rejected. She did not come. The officer, she said she would get an officer to come. That didn't happen. We've had to fight and claw for officers to come to that subway to even talk and discuss about the possibility of replacing it with a safer crossing. Now, it's like a game of Frogger over there. I don't know if you've ever played that. It's a fairly good game, actually. But people are taking their lives at risk with this one. It's not a subway which is well maintained. It's like your previous candidate from my ward once said, it was going to be completely looked after by Aldi. That hasn't happened. In fact, they only had an obligation to clean it up once, and it is in a dreadful state. It smells like urine every time you walk through there. I've seen worse things going through there as well. Also, we've asked for grass cutting in the extension parks 3 times a year. Now, this one's a very interesting one as well, because we are reliant on the farmer to actually cut this grass. That isn't good enough. Residents don't think that's good enough. It is a council-owned park. The council should be maintaining this park. And I think for the poultry summit, it's a fair game. So again, I just want to say thank you to the Mayor. You've been fabulous.
Thank you. I've got one more meeting. Councillor Mullen, please.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether to call you Madam Mayor or unpaid elected chairperson at this point, but can I begin by saying that it does seem a little bit unfair that Councillor Doyle isn't being allowed to speak, given he did give prior notice of his intention to do so, and has written such a beautifully long and elegant speech that I think it would be sad not to hear it. I'll begin by thanking the Liberal Democrats for participating in the budget process that we as opposition parties are invited to take part in by council officers, and for meeting the submission deadline set out by the council in the way that the Constitution allows, in what is completely a legitimate fashion, even if some people question why we do it. Although I would point out that we did give notice in the resolution of Scrutiny Coordinating Committee that both parties would be submitting budget amendments, and so it seems a little bit odd for other people to be questioning why we're doing it and saying that they had no prior notice it would happen. I do have 7 reservations with the Lib Dem amendment, which I will highlight. The first is the reduction in area committee support. We currently are down 2 members of staff, as has been explained to the groups, on an individual basis, which I think we're all seeing as having an impact upon how area committees function and what we get out of them. And the Lib Dem cut to this would mean that that collection of vacancies would be made permanent and potentially reduce staffing further. And that wouldn't be sensible in any event, but particularly not when you come on to the second proposal, which is to reduce area committees to become coterminous with parliamentary boundaries. My group has never really understood the logic of this, but it's a particularly obscure thing to do, given that the boundary review has put 2 Gateshead wards into Washington, meaning that the Washington constituency becomes smaller than the others, and because the Lib Dem amendment doesn't actually suggest reallocating funds in a way different to how they're done now, it would mean that per head the council gives more money to residents in Washington than it does in Sunderland, which might be in support of Kieran Morrissey's parliamentary bid, or it might be a genuine oversight, but it is something to be conscious of. The proposed cuts to special responsibility allowances are smaller than we have proposed, and we're not quite sure about why we would get rid of the title of mayor when we can just get rid of the money, so that's another point of disagreement. The £1 reduction in, 1% reduction in council tax increase is half of what we're proposing, but we consider as a group to be better than nothing. Not quite sure how many bin replacements you'd get for £6,000, but I think there would be implications there for the demand of residents once they begin to find out you can get them for free. I think we'd very quickly go over what £6,000 would allow for. £50,000 for the permit for driverless households, I think, makes sense, but when you think that for an extra 90,000, you could eliminate the cost of all permits entirely across the city, including for households that don't have cars, it seems to me that it would be worth it to just find the extra 90 grand and to deliver what we are suggesting so that nobody is paying for permits in CPMS areas. It's miraculous how many working groups and feasibility studies you can get for £12 million. I'm slightly taken back by the proposal to have a reptile park in Seaburn behind Morrison's. I'm not sure quite how well that will go down with residents there, but it would stop them building houses on it. Of course, our favourite newt is the crested hartnack. But it does seem like the principle of this £12 million investment just happens to fall in Lib Dem wards, and there's no benefit, for example, for Barnes, for example, in this. So in summary, it seems to us that this is quite limited in its ambition, it's quite parochial, there are quite a lot of feasibility studies and working groups. It feels like a sugar-free version of the Conservative budget, and so for that reason we fully support it.
Thank you, Councillor Mullen. Councillor Williams, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Right, area committees 5-3. Actually, after officers came out to talk to you... Sorry, thought it had gone on. I asked officers for some feedback after they'd come to speak to you. They were very positive and they said you valued area committees and how good it was. So I thought, great, no budget proposals for changes this year. Gobsmacked again. So why do we keep picking this up? We've already heard from Councillor Mullen. If we redistribute across that, be good for us in Washington. Let's be parochial, I would like that. It's not the best interest of the city, though, is it? But that would leave Sunderland with an area committee of 48 members. Can you imagine managing all of those, with all those different, when we've looked through the proposals tonight, it's been a little bit of money for my ward, a little bit of money for my ward, a little bit of money for your ward. Nothing for Washington or for Houghton and Hetton. And I think, as councillors, we've got a collective responsibility to meet the needs of every resident across this city, regardless of whether they live in your ward or my ward. All residents are equal and deserve that input from us, which is, I think, why we as a group look at presenting a balanced, well-thought-out budget across the whole of the areas rather than be parochial. So I think we need to get to that. I absolutely take what Councillor Mullen said, not Councillor Mullen, Councillor Miller says about talk to us before we get to this point. At budget meetings, we absolutely, well, if you want to come and talk to me, anytime, I'm happy to talk to you. But, yeah, and have some reptiles in there as well, please. As long as I don't have to touch them, I'll be fine. So, I don't understand the attack on area committee when you value them. They're doing an amazing job. There's lots of money goes out there for you and us as area committee to decide where your priorities are. And lots of the bits that have been put up there are actually what you could be using your area committee for. And your funding's for that. I mean, I've looked at the leisure management programme. Have you not been around in area committees the past couple of years with the money as from central funds that we've put in to each area committee to look at upgrading the parks and the green spaces across each area committee? That's what this money should have been for. Have you not seen that? Sorry? Well, then you need to, you need to, talk to us about that and see where we're going. £2.5 million was put in centrally to support area committees. And then, of course, it's down to each area committee to decide if they want to add to that. And some area committees did. We in Washington decided to do that because we value our play. Just a couple of more things. Yeah. There's an open invite. I'm really disappointed I didn't get to speak on the last amendment. I did have lots to say on there, but I will put out an open invitation to anyone. If you want to come and talk about asset transfers, Washington United, please do so, the events budget or the FPIT. Please make some time. I'm more than happy to talk you through anything that's to do with those, but colleagues, I'd urge you not to support this amendment, please. It's too parochial, and I think we as councillors need to take the grown-up line and look at our residents, not our wards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Guy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to say this in the most constructive way possible, because I think we all have different styles of how we conduct ourselves today. Some I don't think is representative of the office that they're currently holding, but hey-ho. I'm the youngest councillor in this room, and I'm very proud of that. And what I'm going to say goes beyond this council, beyond government, and that is my disappointment in previous generations not taking the environment and climate change and the global warming seriously. But now this council has a target. It's got a plan together. It's fully funded, as outlined in the budget that we presented today. But, and I wholly support that plan. And every time we consult young people in the city, they, and I guess in a way we, always come back talking about the environment and environment protection and avoiding an environmental devastation, and that's always been a top priority for young people in the city and across the city as a whole. But time and time again, generation after generation, council after council, over decades, have failed to address the climate crisis, and even in the past few months, the international community itself has described the current climate crisis as code red, and after a reasonable and well-thought plan to achieve net zero as a city and to do our bit in protecting the planet with the greatest amount of public support that we've ever had regarding our net zero targets, why is it that the Liberal Democrats have proposed to completely slash that from the budget? I, in no way, shape or form, want to suggest that the Liberal Democrat group is stupid in any way. I know that privately some have suggested that he's a climate deniers. I do not believe that you are climate deniers at all, and I want to make that very clear. But why is it not a priority for you? So, Madam Mayor, I want to say right now that I'm not prepared, as a person of the younger generation, to stand here and watch all the good work and all the urgent work that needs to be done regarding the climate go down the drain for another generation to be let down and ignored. We can't do it again, and I want to make that very clear, we can't do it again. I want to urge the people in this room today to listen to the people, listen to our young people particularly, and accept the reality that we face. Let's do our jobs. Let's fulfil a key duty that we are elected to do, being protecting the city, the residents and its future, and vote against this, the amendments that are being proposed, because something that needs to be made very clear is that, and I absolutely support cleaning up dog excrement off the streets, but that's not going to reduce the global temperatures. And I think that's scientifically fact-checked. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guy. Leader, would you like to exercise your right of reply?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can barely contain myself. First of all, I've waited 5 years to hear Councillor Hodgson say I'm right about something. Thanks, Councillor Hodgson. It's very much appreciated. And yes, if I could have a certificate in the post, that would be lovely. Secondly, equally disappointed that this was just a shameless politicisation of 12.24 million by the Lib Dems to punch a bunch of money into their wards and then have this council say no to it, so I can see the materials in those wards now for the local elections. Honestly, as transparent as the glass in the windows of this council chamber. And I very nearly had a tearful moment over the love fest breaking out between Councillor O'Brien and the Mayor. Honestly, it was almost a beautiful thing. And I just wish that you'd behaved like that towards other mayors in the past more, Councillor O'Brien. It was lovely to see. And in closing, very interesting to see that Councillor Mullen is now a protagonist against his own government on council tax. I'm sure your career is going to be long within the Conservative Party, Councillor Mullen. But honestly, just accept. I'll stop there, Madam Mayor. We've had quite long enough on this, but once again, my group will be voting against this amendment because the amendment actually carries no substance to it whatsoever, given the overall strength of the amendment put forward by the ruling group. And it's just unbelievably political, even more so than the Conservatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. We will now vote on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If the officer could confirm when the vote is running, please. Members, the vote is running now.
We have debated that, yes. Thank you. He's asked for a break. Some members. There's some people never moved at all. So fair enough. Fair enough. We need to bring the substantive vote as fast as we can. Not having a break.
Members, the vote will be closing shortly. Could the officer please close the vote? So there are 25 votes in favour of the amendment and no abstentions, 43 votes against, and therefore the amendment is defeated.
Thank you very much. Following on from the amendment votes,
Madam Mayor,
Councillors Mullen and Doyle have notified that they wish to speak
Point of order,
on the
Madam Mayor.
substantive motion. Sorry.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I
Councillor
don't
Dixon.
think my vote was recorded, if I may just mention that.
Yes. Check. Councillor Dixon thinks his vote wasn't recorded. Thank you. Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Dixon. In light of that, we will run the vote again. Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, one of our members has gone to the toilet and he's previously voted that you can't, like, it's slightly unfair if you leave out his vote because he's already voted.
I understand. For everyone else, for the information for everyone else, at the conclusion of the main vote, we will be taking a break, a comfort break, before we start the extraordinary meeting. So anyone else may choose not to leave the room at this point. Councillor Hodson, would you be happy? No, I was going to ask you. Oh, come on, Paul. Sorry, Councillor Edgeworth, we are going to the vote again and we've waited for you. Okay, thank you.
So could the officer confirm when the vote is ready, please? So the vote's running, members.
I hope everybody realises this is still the amendment. Do you think? Just to clarify for everyone, this is a vote on the Liberal Democrat amendment. Yeah, we haven't reached the substantive vote yet.
So, members, the vote will close in a moment. So if the officer could close the vote, please. So there are 26 votes in favour, 43 votes against, and therefore the amendment is defeated.
Thank you. Right, following the vote, we move to the substantive motion, and Councillors Mullen and Doyle have notified a wish to speak. Can I ask, does any other member have a comment or question on the substantive motion? If so, please indicate.
Councillor Hodson.
Thank you. Councillor Mullen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think given the time, I'll not actually give a full speech. I'll just make a couple of relevant points off the back of speeches that have already been made, and that will, if you'll accept that, suffice for what I was going to say. Firstly, thank you to Paul Stewart for cutting his own allowance and for increasing the carbon reduction budget by £1.20. You've bested us again, Paul. Thank you also for highlighting our consistent cutting of councillors' allowances. I would just point out to him that some of the comparative examples he gave are one-member ward councils, so they're not directly comparable to Sunderland. And it was quite brave of you to mention Croydon, given that Labour bankrupted Croydon Council, where council tax is going up this year by 15%, I think. Just on the question of the costings, you asked where we got our costings from. That was from the finance director. We didn't just pluck the figures out of the air, that they were official council figures. Councillor Farthing made some interesting points about the F-bit, saying that we mustn't want to win in Washington anymore, as if to imply that it's only to win votes. But it was, of course, now a proposal last year as well. And nonetheless, grateful for you reminding voters that we are endorsed by Washington United Football Club. Thank you for putting that back on the record. The CCTV camera at the Holiday Inn is at the request of residents who have contacted Peter Noble about that. Councillor Tighe mentioned Jack Sim. He didn't defect to the Labour Party. He was undertaking espionage work to find out to find out when your action days are, and that was successful in that regard. And I'm glad that he thinks supporting Labour is madness, because clearly this half of the room thinks that as well. And then there was a slight contradiction in what the leader said. It started off being Groundhog Day. It was the same old stuff. It's the same as what we've been doing for the last few years. But then, on the other hand, it was completely news to him, and he hadn't had enough notes of it, and how could he possibly comprehend it in such a short period of time? I will just make the point again that I made in relation to the Lib Dem amendment. We participate in what we're invited to participate in by council officers. We're asked if we want to put forward budget amendments, and there is a timetable set out for us to do that, the deadline for which is set by the council, not by us. So the fact that you only get notice on the Monday beforehand is not something we decide. If you want to change the rules, you can, but we just participate in the process as it exists. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Doyle, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the interest of saving time, I have nothing further to add, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hodson, please.
Yes, Mayor Sunderland, I always have something more to add. Now, Graham Miller earlier on said that it was the first time I've ever said you were right. That cannot be the case. And just to prove the point, I have 7 more things you and this council you lead are right about, that I'm very happy about. And I want the opportunity, they're in this budget package, to commend what the council is doing and the officers who are working on these projects. The Bishop Wearmouth redevelopment and restoration scheme is fantastic, as is the Heritage Action Zone around High Street West, as is the work on the seafront and the Sunnyside redevelopment scheme. I'm not being flippant. A lot of the really important architectural fabric of the city, which is significant, is crumbling, and this is pretty much our last gasp to save some of it. I'm really glad that the council is putting some serious money into doing so. It's extraordinarily important. If we don't do it, it will not be there for another generation. Now, also very positive are the improvements, and there's a decent budget aligned for them, to the Arts Centre in Washington, to the Museum and Winter Gardens, and the libraries in Washington and Houghton. We know from the pandemic and our learning from surveys that these are extraordinarily important to residents. We know if we want to be a vibrant city that we need to, our cultural offer needs to be as strong as possible, and it costs money. On that point, I would say, because I think Louise Farthing mentioned, or maybe, sorry, Linda Williams mentioned the 200,000 plus attendances at the Museum and Winter Gardens. That's actually extraordinary and is booking a national trend, that our staff running that service, which has been under the cosh, let's be frank, for a long time, are doing so on a tiny budget is a real credit to that department. I would also say, just as a little flag of warning there, that's a 10 million proposed spend dependent on getting £5 million of external grant money. And I have said this before, but if we don't get that external grant money, which is always severely contested, we still need a decent plan for refurbishing the museum and Winter Gardens, especially if it's drawing that sort of money, because that sort of visitor attendance is likely to mean, frankly, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds of associated spend and investment in the city centre, and we shouldn't ignore it. Now, the reason I mention these things is because on the flip side of this, you have the old civic centre currently being demolished. Obviously, there's part of that in this budget. The Crowtree site being redeveloped, having sat empty for 20 years. 10 years, sorry. The Glass Centre recently announced, and we have talked about the Glass Centre closure. Now, what worries me about some of those big developments is we have a waste of embedded carbon, buildings not being reused but being pulled down and new buildings being built instead of them. On page 41 of our budget pack, you have £466 million worth of capital investment. It's a huge amount of spending on a lot of new buildings and new leisure resources and new infrastructure for the city, which is extraordinarily important. But the Glass Centre should stand as a warning to us about that spending, because if we are building in such a temporary way, as we have done in some of the projects in Sunderland over the past 10, 20, 30 years, then we're throwing good money after bad. I really hope that when the city is building its new culture house, it will be building for forever and for the long term, and not for, and not just for the short term. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Mayor Sunderland.
Thank you, Councillor. Leader, would you like the right of reply?
Might have to start my own loving here with Councillor Hodgson. Honestly, Niall, you and I are getting closer with it every day. Right. Thank you, Councillor Wood. If you send the forms in the post, I'll make sure the dog eats them. Now, I can't talk about what's gone before, Councillor Hodgson, because I wasn't in control of what's gone before. But I am trying to ensure that what we build from 2018 is for the long term. And that is what we intend to do. I'm also very, very clear, because the Labour group are very, very clear, that we want to protect our old buildings and, where we can, recycle them and keep the frontages because they're beautiful, Elephant and Castle at Mackie's Corner and other buildings. So we will continue to do that, because the city is a sum of its parts, not about new shiny glass boxes. And there is not a great deal we can do about the Glass Centre. It's not ours. Right? That's for the university to deal with. But I'm sure the chief exec and officers are talking with the university to see what can happen there. Because we don't want to lose the Glass Centre skills and technologies and education that comes in and out of it. But that's for others to determine where we go. What was I going to say? Oh, yes. I'll just leave it there. I think we've said enough tonight. I do appreciate that there is a great deal of thought goes into some of these amendments, and I just wish you'd bring it to us earlier so that we could have a proper discussion about it. I'm deadly serious. I've said this for 5 years and I've still not had a single person come to me 6 months out saying, Graham, about this, can we have a look at that? Because until we know about it, we can't do anything about it. And we can't do anything about it here this late in the day, because to take part of an amendment means we have to take the whole amendment, and that damages what we've put in place with the finance officers for the budget for the following year. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. That now brings us to the vote on the substantive motion before the Council, which must be a recorded vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So if the officer can confirm when the vote's running, please. So the vote is running now, members. So the vote will close in a moment. And if the vote could be closed now, please. So there are 40 votes in favour, no abstentions, 29 votes against, and therefore the motion is agreed.
I declare the motion carried. And that concludes the budget meeting. Thank you. However, we do have an extraordinary meeting to follow, but we are proposing a 10-minute break, comfort break. Can we please have you back in your seats by 7:10? Thank you very much.
Please be upstanding for the